on to another episode of the Retro Football Review, and it's myself, Kirk Buchner, owner-operator of NotInHallOfFame.com, also the fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, also the fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. Vote now or later. Just vote at some point in time. www.notinhalloffame.com/USA. And I am joined by Paul Lawrence. And if he does not know the answer in a Hall of Fame related question, you asked the wrong question.
Well, thanks for the plug and kind of getting the expectations on me pretty high. But I appreciate that. And the Hall's kind of been a fun thing for me to follow for many, many years. And you and I were just talking as we record this. The annual enshrinement events are already underway for the class of 2023 in Canton, Ohio. And a few of us, myself and some others that we know, some colleagues and friends of the Buchner verse, will be actually in Canton over the weekend to experience many of the very unique and kind of traditions of enshrinement for the new class of 2023. So great time of year for us fans.
Some of the people who we're going to look in this game might be making an appearance there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that's loaded, right, with current and potential Hall of Famers, and some of them might be walking the streets of Canton in the next few days.
Yeah, some with a walker.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. We're looking at Super Bowl 10, which we looked at a lot of historic games, but we've never looked at, well, I think with the exception of the Ice Bowl, we've never looked at a real competitive game yet. Finally, the Super Bowl is a competitive game. It took a long time to get there. For the younger listeners or younger viewers, you've been really blessed. There's been a lot more good Super Bowls in the last 10 years. Paul and I can tell you when we were growing up in the 80s, shitty Super Bowl after shitty Super Bowl after shitty Super Bowl. Also, a lot of the ones we sort of looked at through the 70s, there weren't a whole lot of competitive ones. Parity has really happened a lot more lately. But we've got our first game that reflects that. And we've got, with two legendary franchises, two former champions, the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's January 18th, 18th or 8th? I wrote down 8th, but it's 18th, isn't it?
Yeah.
18th, okay. 1976. But as always, we ask, how did they get here? The Cowboys are the NFC representative, and they had a bit of trouble in the first round. They needed a Hail Mary to beat Minnesota. And here's something I didn't know. Staubach gets credited with the Hail Mary term, but that was well before. There was apparently references to that in the 1930s. But I think it just also fits that it's Roger Staubach and a former Navy guy. It just seems to be like, if we're going to attribute it to anybody, let's give it to this guy. Don't you think?
Well, plus he is Catholic, right? So it has that kind of
okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he did say after the game, when they were asking about that last second large touchdown to Drew Pearson. I mean, the myth of the story goes that when he was asked by reporters afterwards, as he replayed how it went out, and he said, I just threw it in the air and I said a few Hail Marys, and that's kind of where the label stuck. But you're right. It's a classic example, right, of a term that's been floating around for a while, but it was tagged for the right time, the right person, the right event of that particular season. And that was a game that came right down to the end and in the first round of the playoffs for the Cowboys, who, by the way, were the first team to advance to a Super Bowl as a wild card.
Yes.
Which is kind of innovative. That the playoff structure had just changed in the NFL to allow that to happen. And, our viewers will remember we've covered the earlier Cowboys win in Super Bowl VI. We also covered the game, the Pittsburgh Steelers for Super Bowl win. So this is the first Super Bowl that has two previous winning teams go head to head against one another. And the hype on this, I mean, we talk about hype today, but the hype back in this time period in early 1976 was more than any other Super Bowl up to that time. And like you said before, Kurt, it's a game, often doesn't happen, right, in sports, especially championship games, where the hype matches the actual game and the outcome. And as we're going to see, this one did. And, we have over 50 Super Bowls now, right, to look back on as a legacy and a history. And yet this game, Super Bowl 10, still ranks by many historians as a top 10 game in the history of the Super Bowl, which even though there's been a lot of duds, as you mentioned, there's also been some greater games that we see a lot of in the 2000s. We've seen a lot of great Super Bowls, but this one has held up to the test of time. And the quick thing about the Cowboys is they were actually a rebuilding team. They had missed the playoffs in 1974, and we're going through a transition, especially on defense. So as we go through and talk about some of the players, you will see some major differences in this 1975 team compared to the team that we saw earlier that won Super Bowl VI and had kind of been a team together since the mid-60s to the early 70s. You'll see some of that changes. And we'll probably also make a little bit of reference to their 1975 draft, which is called the famous dozen players that were drafted by the Cowboys in 1975. Kind of parallels what we discussed in our previous Super Bowl with the great 74 draft.
Do you have that draft?
Sorry?
Do you have that draft, Andy?
I could dig it up, but I can tell you you're going to hear from two of those players in this game extensively, and several backups. So
while you're doing that, then I'll just sort of like run down the rest of how they got there. Dallas had a much easier time in the conference finals, easily defeating the Los Angeles Rams 37-7. For Pittsburgh, it was an easier run. They defeated Baltimore 26-10 and Oakland 16-10. Which was really one thing that was very interesting is that the the Steelers had to overcome 12 combined turnovers in those two games. So Pittsburgh offense was pretty much letting them down, but the Steel Curtain just held. So remained the great story of that. As Paul started looking at, we didn't look at the official NFL Films one. We found one from an original broadcast that had a few commercials, because in the halftime show, which we're going to be ripping on, I'm ripping on it. I assume you are too. Okay, yeah. And,
I knew you would.
Oh God, yeah. God, I watched it twice because I just couldn't. I made my wife watch it because I said like before you were born, because like I remember because she was born in '79. I said before you were born, this was the halftime show. But credit goes, and if you want to watch what we watched, credit goes to the handle Survivor 504.
Yep.
So I want to give proper credit to that. Do you have that draft?
Sorry?
You have the 75 draft? Sorry, I put you on the spot. I should have told you.
Oh, no. I can get it up here in a second. But yeah, they sort of were rebuilding the defense. So this was a Cowboys team that, as we said, had a lot of success in the 60s and won that early Super Bowl. Was not really expected. And what people don't really, some of the differences here is the Cowboys dynasty of the 70s is really two different teams. Some of the players carried over from the early 70s into the mid and late 70s. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, as we talked about with the previous Super Bowl, right, they were merged in 1974. And the core of that team was pretty much in place by 74. And they would go on this run, and we're seeing them here in their second Super Bowl. And some would argue, later we're going to cover some of the later Super Bowls of the Steelers in the 70s, but this may have been, by many measures, the best complete team the Steelers had in that era. Some might argue some of the later Steelers teams in the 80s or in the 70s were, but this is a pretty good team, really good team, in fact.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to bring that up here because now I didn't prep myself here for it, but here I'm going to Pro Football Reference, Dallas Cowboys draftees. Damn it, stupid. I just sort of went all the way up.
All 12 made this roster. That's kind of the key thing with that draft is they all were on the roster. 12 rookies rebuilding that team. A lot of role players and a couple guys who wouldn't really play much in this game will be key to the Cowboys in the mid to late 70s. But their first two draft picks, we're going to talk a lot about them in this game and in future Super Bowls.
Well, yeah. So let's see. Here I got it. So Randy White, Thomas Henderson. Oh, and then it just dropped on me. Burton Lawless.
Yeah.
On my Safari thing, it just keeps scrolling all the way whether I want it to or not.
Well, you hit some of the main highlights. It was just the interesting point about the Dirty Dozen is that it's rare for a team, right? at that point with 12 rounds of a draft for all your draft picks
to make
the roster. And this was back when there wasn't a practice squad or things like that. They all made the roster. So there's a lot of depth on defense and on special teams. And a key veteran pickup that we're talking about as we go through the game as well, which has an intriguing connection.
Another big name, Bob Brunick. So, yeah. So with that, CBS has the game, and we did one, I forget which one, I think it was Super Bowl III, I could be wrong, where I was sort of upset that Pat Summerall was doing color. Pat Summerall is doing play-by-play. I love Pat Summerall. I wasn't that familiar with Tom Brookshire, but I thought he did a phenomenal job here. And kudos to the CBS production team. Again, we're looking at 1976, and they did a great 1-minute open of just, again, telling how they got here. It was really good, slick for its time, sort of like doing like a photo book of things. It seems so low right now, but I think for 76, if I was a little kid, I'd be like, wow.
Yeah.
And we're just watching not just the evolution of football, but the evolution of production. And I get a big kick out of that. The big story that Summerall tells us all about is Lynn Swann. He had a concussion in the previous game against Oakland, was in the hospital. And we'll be talking about a concussion later on in this game where, my God, another thing that's just sort of changed so much. I mean, I don't know that Swann would have been allowed to play, but he was. And I mean, just knowing what we know now, and thankfully he's okay. I've never heard of any issues with him cognitively. There might be, but I hope that that's sort of not the case. Brookshire is mentioning also that the Cowboys are coming in pretty healthy, more or less healthier than Pittsburgh. Dallas won the coin toss. We didn't see that. I mean, we didn't see the pageantry yet, but that's okay. I mean, that's not that big a deal. Get a couple commercials here that I wanted to point out because we didn't see all commercials. So, commercial for Die Hard battery. Because the man thinks that basically he left his lights on in the car. Well, luckily he had a Die Hard, which is only sold at Sears. Good luck getting that now.
That is true.
I just wanted to bring that one up. I thought that was kind of interesting. The department store.
Well, yeah, and for our viewers who are under the age of 50, Sears was really the first prototype for kind of like a department warehouse type store. I mean, it wasn't membership based like Santa Claus and Costco and stuff are, but it had a catalog, right? And it was more kind of this warehouse retail innovation that was unique and lasted for decades, but has pretty much been wiped out largely because of the big mega warehouse stores plus online shopping. So it's pretty much disappeared for the most part from the Canadian and the North American retail landscape. But it was a big deal growing in the 70s.
So kids, think of it this way. When you go to Amazon to buy your stuff, what we used to do, maybe more our parents, right? But they would get this big catalog, right? This big giant Sears quarterly catalog of virtually everything that they had. And I guess people bought from that or phone. I don't know how they
bought from that or went to the store. And boy, oh boy, when the Christmas Sears catalog came by and you're a kid, you're grabbing that sucker.
For the toys.
And you're ripping pages out, and you're getting yourself a pen, and you're circling, your toys and your logo, your Hot Wheels or your Legos or whatever, because it's in that Sears catalog. Where you can also get yourself a chainsaw if you're a parent while you buy your kids Christmas presents.
I think sometimes my dad wanted to take a chainsaw at all the toys I had. The best toy I ever got was the Millennium Falcon. Right now, I think anyone who is watching under 30 are saying, okay, boomers, shut up.
Yeah.
We're not boomers, technically. Technically. Oh, wow. We get a bit of pageantry as so here's something a little bit different from what we've seen. We get some introductions. We haven't seen that in broadcasts before. Mm-hmm. So the Pittsburgh defense gets to enter the field, and it was a little clunky, as it didn't really it didn't really sync with who was sort of like coming up. But it was still fun to watch. They introduced the Dallas offense, and based on the crowd response, seemed to be a lot more of a Pittsburgh crowd. Oh, I should mention, we were in Miami, so in the Orange Bowl, I don't think that makes any difference. I think it's relatively similar distance or effort, rather, for fans of Pittsburgh and Dallas, but I thought it was interesting that it was more of a Pittsburgh crowd.
Yeah, and a couple other little pop cultural references for our viewers. That if anybody's familiar with the suspense film Black Sunday,
Mm.
they actually filmed scene that whole movie was on a premise around, let's be a little careful nowadays, but a fictional terrorist attack on the Super Bowl via the Goodyear blimp. There's two cultural references in one. And they actually filmed some of the background scenes during this game to later use in that movie. This is also the last Super Bowl that kicked off as early as 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Oh,
And the thought at the time was that they would allow a finish time before the commencement of the evening church services. But also, and I'll have to find the reference, the game ended early enough that people could still switch to their Sunday evening primetime TV shows. Which, of
that's
course, we all
interesting.
know today the Super
Yeah,
Bowl,
it is
is
the
an
show.
evening thing that takes up almost most of the evening, and of course, most of the day with the pregame. But it's kind of interesting that this is the last game that was actually played in what we consider more of a Sunday afternoon traditional time slot
Okay.
football.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting.
And you also notice logos on there because this was one of the events leading into the American Bicentennial of 1976. So you see this
Yes.
logo on the jerseys. And
Oh,
the Cowboys actually added a red stripe down the middle or side of the helmet as
oh,
well
okay.
that they actually brought back, I think, a year or two
So they could
ago for
be
the
like red,
first
white, and
time.
blue.
Yeah, so instead of just the
Okay.
white and blue stripe, they added a red stripe down here. And if you're watching the game, you might notice
Oh,
what's going
I
on with that. So.
okay. Well, got a couple more commercials. We got one for United Airlines, and from a guy, but it's pitched from a guy who likes gingerbread cookies. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
One for Ham's beer. I'd never even heard of this beer. Well, this is about the manliest commercial I ever saw because they're a bunch of men playing basketball and they're joined by one guy who's walking with his pet bear. And no, I'm not talking about sort of like the LGBT version of a bear. I just learned what that is. But an actual bear. And then as they're all playing basketball, then the bear is sort of like, I don't know, but they were all actually.
Did somebody at least, Kurt, did somebody at least give the bear a beer?
I think the bear just took whatever beer he wanted. I think that was just
I mean,
assumed.
who's gonna if he's rubbing around in the cooler, who's gonna stop him, right? Take one.
Which is cheesy as it sounds, it's better than what Bud Light came up with lately.
Yeah, yeah. No, beer commercials were for many many years, right? Some of the best you'd see in Super Bowls. Crazy, cultural, weird,
Well,
but
yeah.
yeah, always were part of the game and have been for many many years. Even though sometimes it didn't make sense, they were a huge marketing thing for beer companies.
Oh, I remember. I can't wait till we get to the Bud Bowl.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, things like that started to pop up, but yeah,
You know how I this will sound so crazy, but I'm a dog person, right? So for my wife and I, she just cares about the halftime show if it's somebody she really likes. Uh, but she'll watch the game with me, and it's usually just me and her, usually just watching it at home, and then we just make a bunch of like greasy food and and have fun with it. But for us, it always starts off with the puppy bowl on Animal
oh
Planet,
yeah, yeah.
and I don't care if I want to like if you want to say hand over my man card, and I've had people say that to me. Fine, I don't care. That's a great thing about after you turn 50, Paul. You just don't give a shit.
They really don't. And this is a game in which was, as you mentioned, the crowd. So we've got over 80,000.
Yeah,
So, and actually, if you look behind me there, that actually is a shot of the stadium from
yeah,
the Goodyear blimp of that game at that time. And
better than
Nielsen
mine. It's in
ratings,
the kitchen.
Nielsen ratings 42.3, which is estimated at about 60 million viewers
Yeah.
with a market share of 78. Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see the dominance, right, of the Super Bowl as a major international, national TV media event by viewers, clearly.
Well, we get the Star Spangled Banner, and I'm thinking I know this guy. It's Tom Sullivan, and he was backed up by some of the people from Up with People. We'll talk about that later. But Tom Sullivan was a blind singer slash actor, and he had guest shots in two of my favorite all time TV series, MASH and WKRP. So played a blind guy in both of them, but he was blind, so he knew how to do that. Unfortunately, he didn't stay to watch the game.
Oh,
Sorry. I couldn't help myself. Uh, the Steelers kick off, and we've got Roy Gerela, who had an interesting game, and he could have very well been the GOAT. And when we used to say GOAT, we don't mean greatest of all time. That
yeah.
used to be what we called the worst player on something. But he was like off and on this whole time. But he had a booming kick, returned by Thomas Henderson on reverse, and it took the last man to get him, which was Gerela. So Dallas gets about as good a start as you can ask for. They got 1st and 10 on the Pittsburgh 44. And I'm going to introduce you to the Dallas offense. The starters, anyway. Quarterback Roger Staubach, running back Preston Pearson, fullback Robert Newhouse, wide receiver Golden Richards, wide receiver Drew Pearson, tight end, I always pronounce this wrong, Gene Fugett.
Yeah.
Fugett, okay. And our line is Ralph Neely at left tackle, Burton Lawless left guard, John Fitzgerald center, Blaine Nye right guard, Rayfield right tackle. Pretty good line. And we got the same. So with the Pittsburgh defense, it's the same front four from our last one. LC Greenwood, defensive end. Joe Green, defensive tackle, left side on the right. Ernie Holmes on defensive tackle. Dwight White on end. The linebackers. Oh my God. Left, Jack Ham. Middle linebacker, Jack Lambert. Oof. You see his post interview stuff. Like Joe Green might be mean. I would rather face him in the alley than Jack Lambert. I'm going to lose either way.
But, yeah, that is true.
But I think after Joe Green beats me up, he's not going to steal my lunch money and kick balls after.
So this defense, dominated the league year round. They were ranked 3rd in fewest yards allowed, and were among the leaders in fewest points given up. They sent 8 of their 11 defensive starters to the Pro Bowl at a time, when their fellow peers were voting, not fans, but their peers and their coaches at that point. So that shows a lot of respect. So yeah, you mentioned some of the highlights, guys like Joe Green,
still more
Greenwood, and guys like Ham and others, and some of these players, for example.
Well, Andy Russell's the third.
Green was injured. Yeah. Green was injured for part of the season, but came back. But Ham and Lambert and the quarterback Mel Blount, who led the league with 11 interceptions and was named NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Those handful of guys, this was probably the best season of their career. And they're kind of at their peak as a defense, as I mentioned before, although this defense would hold together, and we will see them later in Super Bowls in the 70s. But you're going to see a defense, the Steelers side, that's in its, I think, as I mentioned earlier, probably in its prime. And the other thing we're going to see is the emergence of Terry Bradshaw as a passing quarterback. We'll get to that later. Yeah.
And you mentioned Mel Blount. I mean, like the other 3 D-backs, JT Thomas, Mike Wagner, Glenn Edwards. So I should mention, I don't have a sponsor for this, but I do get a kick out of this. Pittsburgh is favored by 7, and you can really see why from everything going in. And it's not so much a shot at Dallas. Again, like you said, Dallas was a wild card team. I don't know necessarily lucky to get there, but they were. You also said team in transition. This was probably the right spread. I think a lot of people lost money. I should check to see how that actually.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Because I think I would have went in betting that line Pittsburgh. Would have been wrong, but so be it. Dallas starts 1st and 10. Oh, I got a question here for you. Sorry, I just want to segue out of this. So you're a Cowboys fan, as we know, but this was sort of before your fandom, right? Because you were still a little kid. So
yeah, I don't recall ever watching this game. So it is a game as I became fan later in the 70s that I of course look at the history of it. I've seen the game, I've seen highlights of it, but I at this point I don't really have the the sort of bad memories and frustration over the loss, right? Because it happened and I didn't remember it.
Yeah, because when I'm a big Saints fan, so when the Saints lose, which half the time, so if I'm watching Sports Center or whatever it might be, and they're recapping the Saints game they lost, I turn the channel. I'm not watching that again. So I was just sort of wondering for you, like, was this hard to watch? But I guess maybe not really because you had no emotional investment.
No, and I realize the greatness of the game. I mean, when we get to Super Bowl 13, which we have to do because it's another one of these great Super Bowls, which is a
Yeah.
rematch of these two teams, I'll probably struggle through that a little bit
Okay.
because I actually struggled. I watched that game as a kid.
Got it. So
Yeah,
that
but
was
this one,
your football awakening, right? Essentially, around
yeah,
that.
that era, that right around that time frame, but it's a little bit later than this game. Yeah.
I forget. So you grew up in Southern Ontario, like I
Mhm.
did, but was it closer to Windsor, or am I wrong on that?
Between Windsor and Toronto, kind of midway through Southern
Oh,
Ontario, and for whatever reason, my dad, we never really followed or watched the
well,
CFL. I had an uncle who was
what
who is
round?
still is a big CFL fan of Hamilton Tiger Cats. But
Yeah.
my dad wasn't really a sports guy. I was just telling someone the other day about this. I didn't grow up in a sports fanatic, crazy kind of house with my dad. He
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed sports, but what he enjoyed, I think, was Sunday was a day off. So he'd like to just the ball games and the playoffs, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
go down in the basement and hang out and watch football, and that was just sort of a leisure for him. We watched a little bit of baseball. We watched a little bit of hockey. We didn't really watch pro basketball or anything like that. But football was kind of something he just enjoyed to watch. He didn't have a favorite team that I can remember. I think he just liked sitting down for 3 hours on the Sundays and maybe do a doubleheader game, right? I don't recall really Monday night being a big deal, Monday night games in our house, but that he was just liked
Yeah.
to relax and watch football. And so as a kid, I
But
was sitting
what
there
town though
watching.
were you in? Because I'm just trying to figure out like what you were able to see because like that was back in the
So,
case.
so we were getting a lot of games across from Cleveland market,
Okay. Yeah.
most more than Detroit. So yeah, and back when there wasn't the blackout, we'd end up watching a lot of Cleveland Brown games, or obviously
Got
just a
it.
national televised game at the
Yeah.
time. So I
Yeah.
grew up with Cowboys fans because the Cowboys were always on TV, a part of doubleheaders, and then of course the playoffs. That's kind
Right.
of how I got exposed to all of that.
Yeah. Because even though we're from the same province, uh, American fans, provinces are what we call states. Uh, but I grew up in Burlington, Ontario, which
Yeah.
is like right next to Hamilton. So for me, it was always a Buffalo game, and then you got whatever you got when it wasn't a Bills game,
Yeah.
which was often something from the NFC East. I was telling that to Vinny, our friend Vinny Laspinuso,
Right.
because he
Makes
was,
sense.
you know, he was a youngin, so it doesn't he appreciates learning all this stuff, but he didn't grow up through that. So like we just got what we got, and it felt like every Sunday, the second game was always either going to be Dallas, Washington, Philadelphia, or
Yeah.
some combination thereof, or New York. Sorry, the Giants
Yeah.
of that, and then maybe you'd get the Cardinals thrown in there
Yeah.
because they were in that division. So it was all NFC East. But sorry, I digress. People don't necessarily want to hear about that. I was just curious because I like talking to Paul. I like this guy. I like learning about this stuff. First play of scrimmage, the curtain just they sniffs out the fake. Staubach fumbles, but thankfully it was recovered by John Fitzgerald. But it's a 5-yard loss. Newhouse rushes for 2, and on 3rd and 13, Staubach overthrows Pearson in a 20-yard pattern. So it starts off great, but they've got a punt. Done by Mitch Hoops. Hoops.
Yep. Mitch Hoops.
Hoops. Okay. But he gets a good one away. Glenn Edwards got a short return, so Pittsburgh's got their first down on their own 17. Let's meet the offense. A lot of people that we just talked about, but there's one big difference from the last time. We'll get to that right away. Our quarterback is Terry Bradshaw. I'm not going to throw my wife under the bus again like I did last time.
And what
Actually,
people have to remember about Terry Bradshaw coming in this season, this game, even though they had won the Super Bowl the year before, there were still a lot of critics and fans who didn't like him, didn't think he was the caliber of quarterback that would make this team, into a multiple year championship kind of as they build a dynasty. They're going into this season and into this game even. There were still a lot of doubters among even Pittsburgh fans about Terry Bradshaw, that many felt that he was the weakest part of the entire team, even though he had a pretty good by the era of the 70s, a pretty good regular season. This season in game would then elevate him into being the Steelers quarterback that we all know the history and legacy of. But that had not been in place as of this game.
I think what hurts him, and you and I, we talk, because again, we became sort of acquaintances, friends. Well, we haven't even met yet, but That's pretty much all the co-hosts I have on virtually everything I do, except for one that I've never met. But that's cool because Twitter divides people. Brought me with a whole bunch of great people because Paul and I, we don't flame war on Twitter. Or X. We just shoot the shit about sports, and it works for us. But I was gonna say here about Bradshaw. I think I've read a few articles here and there, and sometimes people will say that Namath is the worst quarterback in the Hall of Fame. I see where they're going with that, and then I'd see some that would say that about Bradshaw. And I think what always hurts Bradshaw. A lot of quarterbacks who are in the Hall of Fame, or just period in general, they're the best offensive player on their team. Bradshaw never was. And
I think it's a natural right for a lot of fans or people who follow the Hall to make that exact kind of connection, right? If you're a quarterback in a Super Bowl, if you're a quarterback in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they assume that you were the best player on all the teams that you were on in order to get into the Hall of Fame. And you're right. And this is a good example. One could argue just as an example that you take a guy like Mean Joe Green, and if you have a Mount Rushmore of defensive tackles, he is on there.
He is.
If you do a Mount Rushmore, again, this is a pretty high level kind of thing, but quarterbacks, even if you say, okay, my Mount Rushmore is going to have 10 heads or figures on it of the top 10 quarterbacks in NFL history, Bradshaw is not going to be in that group, and I think it's exactly Taft. What you're referring to.
He's Taft of your presidents or whatever. It's not even a shot at Bradshaw. I mean, like you mentioned Joe Green, so like that's sort of why I specifically said he isn't the best offensive player, because I think you and I are in agreement that Joe Green is the best Steeler of all time. I think a lot of Pittsburgh fans would say that. I actually have one of my lists out for that sort of thing. I've got him and I've got Lambert number 2.
Yeah.
If people want to disagree with me on that, I don't know.
No, I think those are both.
Yeah.
You take the big picture, the entire history. Those are legitimate top 2 Steelers of all time. And again, it's an example, right, of a dynasty or a franchise with a long, rich history to say that you got a quarterback, a Bradshaw in the Hall of Fame who isn't.
But do you penalize him because he had great teammates? Well, no.
No, we should.
Obviously, they all loved him, and then he won with those teams. But Bradshaw quarterback. If anyone's wondering why I said I wasn't going to throw my wife under the bus, I'll tell the story again. My wife, who has no concept of football, but she'll watch the big games with me because she's awesome, and I will watch chick flicks with her because I'm awesome. We watch Failure to Launch with Matthew McConaughey, great football fan, and Terry Bradshaw played his dad. I said, "Honey, that's Terry Bradshaw." She looks at me, says, because Sarah Jessica Parker's in this, and she looks at me like I'm an idiot. No, that's Terry Bradshaw.
Oh well.
I thought it was funny.
It is.
Yeah. I love you, honey. Running backs, same ones we had before. Rocky Bleer and Franco Harris. Harris is fullback. Here's what's different. Last time we did this, we had Lynn Swann and John Stallworth as backup wide receivers. Now they're starters.
Right.
And we're going to see a lot of them, especially Swann. O-line, tight end Larry Brown, O-line John Cobb at left tackle, Jim Clack at left guard. I said it right this time. Center Ray Mansfield, right guard Jerry Mullins, right tackle Gordon Gravel. Our Dallas defense, we got our first thing. I love these names. Left defensive end Ed Too Tall Jones. Ed Too Tall Jones. He was also excellent in that episode in Different Strokes where he played Too Tall Jones.
He was the Cowboys' number one overall draft pick in 1974, and was that transition that if you followed us for the previous Super Bowl with the Cowboys, the defensive line has gone through like a sort of a 50% change or shift, and you're going to highlight that here in a second. And he's one of those, and he had a very long career in Dallas, especially for a defensive lineman.
Yeah, didn't he retire at one point to be a boxer?
Yep, in the early 80s. I think he was away from the game for maybe a year, I think, and then he came back. He actually played right up until the end of the Landry years.
Did he win a fight, though? Do you know, Paul?
What's that?
Like, he went into boxing, but did he win anything?
Not really. I mean, it was given his height, it was sort of a promotional gimmick type thing, and he wanted to do something a little bit different, maybe kind of a contract dispute thing with the Cowboys as well.
Yeah, why
But he
not?
would come back and play several more years, all the way to the end of the Andre era. I mean, he played for 15 years, which is not common, especially for a defensive lineman. That long of a
Is
career.
like one of the best names. It's so like
Yeah.
if you type his name in Pro Football Reference, obviously you can tell I go to that a lot. If you just type in Ed Jones, it does not necessarily come up. But if you type in Too Tall, then it does. Like it's just
So
great.
I met him
Oh yeah.
many years ago. He was actually doing a national-wide kind of promotional thing with a local shoe store company, kind of a chain
Mhm.
type thing. And he was going around the country, right? And he was showing up and doing autograph events to promote, the local store. And so I went over and met him and got his autograph. And he's one of these guys. I mean, I obviously knew who he was. I've seen him play, but he's one of these guys when you walk in. I mean, if he randomly walked down the street, you would know exactly who he is because he still looks the same. Of course, he's very
Yeah.
tall, has a bald head, very lean. I mean, he looks, obviously he's much older, but you don't mistake. And Too Tall was a perfect name because a guy that height, wasn't something that you normally saw in football.
No.
Um, it has some advantages, but it has some disadvantages. It's just kind of a unique
Yeah,
backstory.
because he didn't have that low center of gravity. That's a huge asset for a lot of defensive players. But we're going to see a lot of Too Tall here. Again, my favorite name in all of professional football, left defensive tackle, Jethro Pugh. Love it.
Yeah,
Uh, I do. I don't know what to tell
it
you.
is.
Right defensive tackle, Larry Cole. Right defensive end, Harvey Martin. So we get to talk about him a bit today. Our linebackers, Dave Edwards, Leroy Jordan, and Dede Lewis. And our secondary, Mark Washington, left corner, right corner, Mel Renfro, and the safeties, Charlie Waters and Cliff Harris at three.
So I just checked for our listeners because if they think we're making a big deal of Too Tall Jones, he was
We're
6'9".
Yeah.
All right, people, think about that for a second. A football player, 6'9".
It didn't happen.
It's a rarity. Yeah.
It didn't happen. It's also well, I just like I was telling you before we went on. We just looked at the 1994 Major League Baseball All Star Game, which I'll promote a little bit later, and you're still in awe of Randy Johnson.
Yeah.
I am in awe of Zdeno Chara. Like when you get that tall and it's not a non-basketball sport, it is sometimes the things just sway against you.
Yeah. Yeah. In a lot of ways, right? It's just not conducive to good, long, sustained careers in these sports that really
Jasper
are.
agrees.
Yeah. See, he's right. Yeah. So it's a rare thing to see that kind of height in.
Yeah.
So that's why we're making a big deal about it.
Well, so let's see what we got here. They mentioned how Bradshaw has his knee taped. He might not be as mobile. And I saw it was a good season for Bradshaw, which when you look at the stats, you're thinking, like, this isn't good. But he threw for over 2,000 yards and an 18-9 TD INT ratio. For 76, that's good. I think, from what we sort of learned. First and 10, Harris rushes for 8 yards on the outside. Blyer gets it for 8 of his own. So we get the same thing that we saw before. I mean, this is what brought you here. You've got probably the best running back in the league at this point. As Brookshire kept saying, the best big running back maybe ever. I don't know if maybe we could still say that. Maybe in terms of longevity, I'd say yes. What do you think?
Probably. And he ranked second in the league. Harris did with 1,246 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then Rocky Blyer had 528, and even their fullback had 285 yards rushing.
Yeah.
And so this was as we've talked about many times with these early Super Bowl games, this is a football structure for team playing and building a roster built around run the ball and on defense, stop the rush.
Mm-hmm. Here's something for you. You think because of Franco Harris and just the way he was built and the way he acted and just conducted himself, you think that's also sort of like made it perfect for Jerome Bettis later in that city? I mean, they would have loved Bettis no matter what, but if you were a little older, you're seeing a lot of Franco Harris and Jerome Bettis. I don't know. I just thought of that now.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad thought. I mean, yeah, have somebody who's already been at the position, was established, and fans sort of, supported and valued how that running back position, the legacy of it. We have that in many franchises in pro sports, right? A legacy on a franchise of a position that's carried forward for years.
It's funny because like we're going to be gushing about running backs probably for the next 30, 40 episodes as we do this. Uh, just a couple weeks ago, something came out on Twitter. You probably saw it too, where they noticed that the average kicker makes more than the average running back.
Yeah.
Now, granted, usually every team only has one kicker, so it's a little skewed that way, but the running back is not nearly what it was.
Yeah.
Uh,
And this season and this game is a hinge point because we will begin to see, and this game is a good reflection of that, the transition of offenses that would continue, and we wouldn't really see it reach its full peak in terms of the passing offenses until we get the West Coast offense and the influence of Bill Walsh in the late 70s and the 80s, and where the game evolved with rule changes and everything. But this game is often pointed as that kind of inflection point, right? Where the pendulum is starting to shift. And we're at the middle of that shift where we're still running the ball. But as you're going to see as we go through this game, the passing game is increasingly a big part of how teams are going to win big games.
yeah. And I think that's also what I love so much about the series. Like we are watching so much evolution in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Uh, in presentation, in offense and defense, everything. Uh, my wife is still looking at me like, why? Why do you care? Because I do.
Because you do.
Why do you want to see the new Barbie movie? I don't know.
Because you do.
I say to her, I was like, I'm not watching that shit. That nobody cares about that. Sorry. Pittsburgh stays on the ground. Harris gets 5 on the first carry, 4 in the second. Sorry, I should have mentioned they got first down on their 33. On 3rd and 1, Mark Washington came up for a 2-yard tackle for loss. So Steelers got a punt. But
do they?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen. God, I wish Vinny was here almost for this. He loves his special teams, and we saw a lot of sloppy special teams, even though we've watched them get so much better. But special teams, I mean, could have caused us to go the other way. The snap was low. Can maybe get a long snapper for that, huh?
Yes.
Dropped quickly and picked up by Jarella. He was tackled. Like 5 Cowboys were descending. At least he didn't pull a Garo Ukrainian. So Dallas has got 1st and 10 on the Pittsburgh 29. That's about it. This is going great for them. Staubach has got to be so happy, and he fakes a handoff to Pearson, but gives it time to get his man, the other Pearson, Drew Pearson, who's all alone at the 10, gets it untouched. Touchdown. 7 point after is good. 7-0 Dallas. And if you're a Dallas fan right now and you just got 7 points on this defense, and you got everything else going, you're thinking we're gonna win. We can win.
And if viewers go back and watch some of the earlier Super Bowls, we often point out, right, where opportunities were missed, where we've had fumbles and key plays and spots where teams wouldn't take advantage of that, and it turned out it would hurt teams in terms of being able to come back in the game or take advantage of momentum. And I don't know about you, but one of the things I love about football games is when you get a turnover and you're at or near the red zone. I love the aggressive. We're going for it. We're the momentum's shifted. We're going to take a shot right now. Rather the counter is like, okay, this is our first possession. We're going to kind of build our presence, right? We have a game plan. They didn't script plays back this early, but nowadays they often do. But this is a kind of like, and Tom Landry was a conservative coach by play calling in many ways. Staubach wasn't necessarily a conservative player when it came at quarterback. But I always love teams that, just take that turnover and like go for the end zone right off the bat. And this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, it's funny, like looking back at a lot of this, Landry too, as we're looking at more games from him, and just as an older person now at this point, because like Tom Landry, when I would watch him, I was a kid mostly. I'm trying to think, when was he let go?
He was let go in the famous they call it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Day
Yeah.
in March of 1989, just shortly after Jerry Jones bought the team and brought Jimmy Johnson right in, and that was the end of Tom Landry. He was at the
Yeah.
golf course at the time when this was all happening, and they had to reach out
Oh,
to him.
really?
And he'd been coached since 1960.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there was the organization there was some movement in the last few years before that to modernize and bring some other assistant coaches in, and Paul Hackett was a guy who was now more involved with the offenses. So the Cowboys under Tex Stram, GM, were kind of looking to move forward, but Jerry Jones buying that franchise,
Mm-hmm.
pull the trigger on all that, and that was a distinct end of that era, and of course beginning of the next one. So
Okay. And I guess why I sort of asked that, because I'm trying to think how he perceived Landry while he was active and while I was sort of like focusing on that. So I've only been 17 and watching football, but not necessarily with a football eye, if that makes sense. So I just sort of like look at this guy. I look at this guy with this, not fedora, but I mean, always with the hat, always in peg. Like you'd hear him talk, and it's like Captain Conservative, uh, whether he was or wasn't, I don't know. But you just sort of like get that vibe. Watching him, watching all this sort of like as you see his personality comes out in ways
Yep.
on the field that he can't possibly sort of do verbally. I think because I think I told you one of my favorite guys ever of all time, who I wanted to be, was Howard Cosell,
Right.
and that's sort of like
Totally the opposite of Tom Landry.
right, right. But I mean, like I read his autobiography, I don't know how many times, and I think that's also why I've got like a big affinity for our friend Vinny, right? Because Vinny's pursuing the dream that I didn't have the balls to do when I was a kid. I wanted to be an analyst, which I guess I am in my own way here in
Sure.
the Buchner verse, but still. Uh, there was a quote from his book where he says like because Tom Landry was brought in as a telestrator for one Super Bowl
Yeah.
while he was still active, and he said, and in that quote was like Landry is a great football mind, but as an analyst, he is the cure for an insomnia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and that's just who he was. He was not a great personality. George Seifert, what he would later become like a personality, I think on I don't remember which broad, it doesn't matter. Like on a pregame thing, he was awful. He stunk. It
Yeah. So
didn't mean
there's been a lot said and written about Tom Landry and kind of being unemotional, but you do point out a good thing on the field that would often come up, and a lot's been written about his relationship with his players and others. But let me just draw one quick point about Tom Landry to put him in perspective that
Mhm.
maybe our fans aren't aware of. Tom Landry survived 25 missions on a bomber in Europe in World War II.
I did not know that. Wait a minute. So
Let's
like
just let's just
on a bomber. So like, what do you mean? Like as a pilot or
Yeah, he
he
flew
was a pilot?
25 combat missions into Europe
Uh-huh.
during World War II.
I did
Let's
not know that.
just this that kind of that era, the greatest generation. Of course, and he went on to play pro football in the 50s. Became an assistant coach along with Vince Lombardi with the Giants
Mhm.
in the 50s, and then both of them would go on, obviously, their greatness, respectively, in the 60s and beyond with the Packers, and of course, Landry with the Cowboys. But if you want to know a lot about the character and background of a guy like Tom Landry, put that into perspective, folks.
No, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Well, that sort of explains a lot of that
It does.
stone demeanor.
And authority and
Yeah, yeah.
control and follow the leader, which is me, not the players. And he ruled that entire franchise.
How did I not know that?
Yep. Yep.
I guess not being because I haven't read every Cowboys book.
But I think it's worth people
Yeah, no, for sure.
understanding that about him. And that says a lot about his demeanor and approach. And he was a man with flaws, like we all are. But I think that's an interesting aspect that people need to give some thought to. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. Uh, so Dallas kicks off. Blunt gets it to the 33. First and 10 for Pittsburgh, but no reason to panic. And of course, it's super early in the first, so you're just going to keep doing what you're doing. You're just going to go to the ground. Harris cuts back for a 7-yard gain. Blyer gets 2, so we got 3rd and 1 to go. Harris gets it easily on the first down with a 5-yard gain. First down on the 47. Blyer gets it for 5. I got that Summerall mentioned that Bradshaw hasn't thrown a pass yet. Didn't have to.
He didn't have to, but
yeah, but he did. But he did. I mean, like, this is just, it's like he knew. So here's a pass. Swan was double covered, but he just jukes it perfectly. Catches a 33-yard pass on the sideline, and we got 1st and 10 on the Dallas 16. So they should be able to convert here. Blyer rushes right up the middle for 5. Harris for 4. 3rd and 1 again on the 7. Fake run fools Dallas. But tight end we got tight end Randy Grossman. He's all alone. I mean, like, how many times have we just seen this in this brief thing that we've been doing this? The unassuming tight end, coming out for something, like nobody's looking at him.
Yeah, and we've mentioned this before, so our viewers who are more familiar with the role of tight end as it exists today, and the passing threat, big time passing threat that emerged in the 80s and is a big part of the game today for offenses. That's not how this played. There were a lot of great, in fact, to this day, historically great tight ends that played in the league, like John Mackey and Mike Ditka, who could catch the pass, but they were never the centerpiece of as the tight ends are today. But they had this perfect role in a running type offense to be a weapon that most defenses weren't prepared for, and unlike today, didn't have the skill and talent set either at linebacker or the extra defensive back wasn't on the field to cover these guys, even though they weren't as fleet and fast as a wide receiver. They were certainly good enough to find the gaps in defenses and take advantage of, let's just say, slower linebackers, since most linebackers couldn't cover these guys. And surprise big catches and touchdowns by tight ends was something you would see on occasion, and there's a perfect example of one.
What are we at? For like 4 of this already? For what you and I have just been doing?
Yeah.
I looked a bit more on Grossman, and like, not a name you think of when you look at the Steelers dynasty, but he was there for all 4. This was his only playoff touchdown. He only ever had 5 touchdowns in 115 regular season games, but so what? He knew his role. This was his role. He did it well, obviously, because they kept him this whole time. PAT good, 7-7. Already, this is so much fun. I love this game. I love this. This is so much fun.
Well, and we just saw, like, that's a classic Steelers drive, right, in this era.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you're saying. The running game and mixing it up, and then, of course, the big pass to to Swan. And Swan's going to have a few of these, and that one there was also a highlight reel type catch. I mean, that's what's amazing when we go through his game, and I won't give away the secrets too much, but there are highlight clips, and we're not talking about average catches, even by today's measure. Catches that he just made and others, we would still go, oh my gosh, in a game today to see some of this stuff. And back then, just wasn't a day-to-day, game-to-game thing. Now in the NFL, right? Every season, during every game, every weekend during the regular season, you see these spectacular catches. We see them, but at this point, they would happen. But have them happen in a big game multiple times is what really is another thing that kind of brings this game above and at the level of some of the best Super Bowl.
And I think this is also, the Super Bowl needed this too.
I mean, you mentioned it in our introductory comments, right? We're really not seen. There's been a couple close games, mainly because of turnovers and sloppy play and teams not being able to kind of finish it, or kind of back and forth. And we see a little bit of that in this game. But in terms of the greatness of play and the highlights and the competitive level of both teams matched up well, this is the first time we see that in a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and just 2 teams just so established.
Yeah.
It's
great coaching, great veteran players. Both teams have either second-year or rookie players that are going to emerge. It's all there on both sides of the ball.
All right, so with the kickoff, Pearson returns it. That's Preston Pearson to the 35. 1st and 10 on the 35. Newhouse carries for 7, tackled by Holmes. Doug Dennison, who we saw a lot of him today. He's their third back. He rushes for 5. Cowboys get a first down. First and 10 on their 47. Staubach throws to their tight end Fugate for 9. Taken down low by Edwards. That was a pretty good tackle there, but that was Fugate's last game with Dallas. He would later go to the Pro Bowl with Washington.
Yeah.
That was his only catch of the game. So 2nd and 1, the Dallas O-line opened up the steel curtain wide open. That doesn't happen too often, but they did it for Newhouse, who rushes up the middle for 16. Even more impressive, they did that focusing on Joe Green. You mentioned earlier, Joe Green was not peak Joe Green at this point, not because of his age or anything, but because he came in hurt. So they were actually targeting, which is fascinating, right? When you think about that. Yeah. They were targeting Mean Joe Green because they thought Mean Joe Green was not 100, which he wasn't.
And he was Defensive Player of the year before. So we're talking about a guy who, in many respects, was or should have been at his prime, but the injury and the season missing so many games, he was not as healthy. But it is great. I mean, we talked about him on the Mount Rushmore of defensive tackles.
And he is.
And here he is injured, and they're targeting their play calling and their O-line assignments and where they're going to run the ball based on going after a weakness because Mean Joe Green was injured. It's kind of bewildering to think about it, but that
might have been my biggest mind fuck.
Yeah, you don't think of a team, you think of a team in the opposite way, right? Game planning not to go at the best defensive player on the field and one of the top defensive players in the league at the time.
Modern fans, it's like, okay, we're going up against the Rams. We're going after Aaron Donald.
Yeah, and we're just going to try to work that to our advantage. Yeah. Good luck if he's healthy.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's where it was, and it wasn't the wrong strategy because Green was not the best today. But Mean Joe at 75% still probably better than anyone else you got. What do I have here? For Newhouse, I wrote down it's his best year. He had 930 rushing yards, 1,205 yards from scrimmage. So that was his best year for that. First and 10 on the 27. Newcomb gets it for 5. Dennison gets close to a first down for 4. 3rd and very little. Give to Newhouse, but it's 1 inch shy, roughly. Dallas goes for it on 4th and an inch. And, it's so different now because I don't know what people would or teams would necessarily do. You're going up against the best front 4. But kicking is we're not in this current era where 40 yards is automatic.
So my only thought here is Landry saying, listen, we're playing against the best defense in the league. Mm-hmm. And we need to get points. The adage, right? You don't want to substitute a field goal instead of a touchdown when you have an opportunity because you're giving up those points and eventually you're going to need those points. And so I think that was probably in his thought process is here we are deep in Pittsburgh's territory. We really, we need to, I don't want to say stay in the game, but we're up against a really great defense. Let's get the touchdown and the points when we can. That was probably the mindset, and hence the roll of the dice, and it actually paid off in terms of getting them a first down.
Yeah, it did. Because I knew the end result, but I don't know the play-by-play. So I wrote down, I thought, okay, they're going to go for a quarterback sneak, which they didn't. They gave it to Dennison, who got 3 yards and obviously a first down on the Pittsburgh 15. So let's see. What do I have here? So the next play, we got no gain as they're sort of adjusting. Jack Lambert just destroys Preston Pearson. 2nd and 10, they give to Newhouse, and Lambert thumps the crap out of him. Oh, oof. But that's the end of the quarter. So it's already been a great first quarter, 7-7. And it's great right now at this point for Newhouse because he needs that extra 2 minutes at the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
Oh, does he need it? Jack Lambert, what a beast.
Yeah, and defensive players, in this era, I mean, you could really bring a hammer down on offensive
Mhm.
players. I mean, running backs, running receivers were being pushed all over the field, and if they went for a caught the ball, they were going to get hammered. Quarterbacks, when it came to sacks, they were defenseless in that sense and get pounded to the turf. It would have to be a pretty blatant kind of late hit type of thing
Mhm.
to get called for a defensive penalty. Otherwise, it was pretty much a free for all, brutal exercise in the defense in the whole league, but especially and the Steelers' mantra was, we are the intimidator. We cannot be intimidated, and you're going to see that
Mhm.
show up later in the game in kind of an interesting play that also
Yeah.
involves Jack Lambert.
Yeah, also too, like we're not really going to talk about it too much, but did you watch the post game stuff, right? Like Lambert pretty much said exactly what you said
Yeah.
verbatim. Like we're we're the ones who mess with you. You don't mess with us. Like Jack Lambert scares me. Is he still alive?
I believe so.
He still scares me.
You go ahead. I'll check on that. Will you go ahead with the play-by-play? But I think he's
Yeah,
still.
because yeah, I'm not messing with him. Maybe you'll see him in a few days if he's still alive. Dallas first and 10 on the Pittsburgh 15. Hold on, I just did that here. Sorry. End of quarter. My bad. First play of the quarter is a false start on Dallas. Unfortunately, that was on Ralph Neely. Staubach throws a fugit, but he's almost picked off by Edwards. So it looks like we're going to have to do a field goal. And Tom Filch, probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but he led the league in field goals and attempts, 22 field goals, 35 attempts, which doesn't sound that good, but whatever. 35-yard or 36-yard attempt is good. Dallas takes the lead, 10-7.
First Super Bowl, by the way, Kurt, with two soccer-style kickers.
Oh, okay, interesting.
A little side note there.
Yeah, no, for sure. You've been watching any of the Women's World Cup?
I haven't really. No, I haven't been following it, but
Yeah, side note, I actually love women's soccer because they don't pretend to be injured.
yeah, yes. Thank you. That's it. I do joy in watching soccer or football. But yeah, the men with the injury and the die that just takes away from me. I'm kind of it is annoying and it takes away from the game and the flow of the game. It's just kind of pathetic. So yeah, I get that.
I met someone when I was living in Barbados. So I met somebody who played for. She was good enough to get. She was good enough to get a scholarship at Temple
Hmm.
to play soccer, and so like she was helping me teach me and my wife tennis because her dad is played tennis like quite a bit.
Well, women's soccer is a
Yeah.
huge sport in the U.S. in college.
Yeah. Yeah. So I asked her. I said like, how come you guys don't die? And she looks at me. She said, like dead eyed, says,
Yeah,
"It says I don't want pussies like you thinking that I'm a pussy."
yeah. I get, yeah.
That's what she said to me. Like, damn, that's awesome.
Makes sense. They don't want to be portrayed as that. They want to be portrayed as hardworking, tough players, and that would go against that image if they started flaking and dying over the field over little nicks and bruises and claiming that it was a major injury that somebody just shot them on the field, which is sometimes in the men's game. I'm like, did somebody pull a rifle out the way that guy went down? And then he's up 2 minutes later walking around. Like, yeah, that's friggin' annoying in any sport.
Yeah,
In soccer, it really seems to be a very common obsessive, and it really, I find it disrupts the whole flow of the game. I just because it just annoys me. But
it is hard,
yeah.
definitely. All right, so kickoff. Blunt returns it to the 32. So or first and 10. Bradshaw now finally goes for a pass on the first down. Too tall runs and deflects the attempt, which luckily for Pittsburgh sailed to nobody. They thump Bradshaw. Bradshaw got hurt today. Hurt more later.
Yeah.
Blyer rushes straight up for 6, and on 3rd and 4, Bradshaw drops back, finds the line, goes behind him, and we see this a lot. That doesn't change in the modern game, and rushes for 7. He has an opening, he took it. First and 10 on the 45. Harris rushes on the left and gets 11. We got another first down. He gets in Dallas territory on the 44. Outside pass is Stallworth, but Dallas wasn't fooled here because it was just like a swing. Loses 5. Harvey Martin gets credited for the tackle for loss. So 2nd and 15, Bradshaw drops way back, finds Stallworth in a tight single coverage, fumbles it, but still ruled a catch. All right. 3rd and 2nd, it gives to Harris, but he can't go anywhere. So it's 4th and 2 on the Dallas 36. They're going to go for it. Bradshaw drops back for Harris, has him, but he couldn't hang on. Franco, just a rare bad play for Franco. Cliff Harris was around him, but still. Turnover on downs. It's still the right play, like at this point, like where you are in terms of the field. So you don't begrudge Chuck Noll for doing that, I don't think. What do you think?
No, I think given the way that the game is played, and I suspect the way that they were thinking the game would play out, right, and the strategies of it was probably the right call at the right time. Of course, we can second guess that today.
I will second guess everything. I mean,
Would you second guess it at this point in this game as well?
Here's the biggest change from 1976 and 2023. Second guessing has 10-tupled or whatever that you want to say. Yeah. We're all armchair quarterbacks.
Well, and we talked about this in the previous Super Bowl we've done. The game just keeps moving along. There really isn't a pause. There isn't really the commentary. There's not there's honestly not instant replay in terms of an officiating tool. Right. They're using it a little bit in the telecast, but penalties and kind of like disputed calls or strategies that maybe coaching calls or that may be kind of like debated. The game just moves on. We don't really see much pause in the flow of the play and the commentary. It's sort of accepted that that's what happened. We're just going to move on. And you don't see much of what you see today would be, a break, a commercial break. And then even after commercial break, right, commentators questioning about the call or the penalty or the hit these games just keep flowing.
That's what makes it hard because, again, I think of my wife, right? Because my wife grew up in Indonesia. I don't know if you know that. So she came to Canada when she would have been 20. I met her when she was 23. She was 18 when she moved here. So trying to get somebody who didn't grow up necessarily on sports, only a bit on soccer, which is sort of like get into the flow of a game that always constantly stops and then just say like no, like these replays are fascinating. She looks at me again like, what? And it was the same thing that I'm sure somebody looked at me once when they said to me like, oh, the best part about like an auto race is what the pit stops. Really? All right, I'm gonna go gas up my car. Do you want to beat off? It's like, but it's the same type of idea.
Yeah.
I mean, to us, this is like the best thing ever. To somebody just trying to get into it, it's like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. What's the big deal?
Right. And I totally get that. Let's see here. Where did I leave off? All right, so we're on what?
We had Dallas 1st and 10 at the Dallas 36.
36. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yep, first down.
Yeah, my Excel sheet here is all blurry here. Newhouse rushes for 3. Staubach throws for 6 to Dennison. And for backup, he had a pretty good game. 3rd and 1. Unfortunately, Staubach overthrows Newhouse. Though Lambert was all over him on this play. Dallas has got a punt. Pittsburgh will get that on their own 23, which is a nothing burger of a drive. Blyer for 2, incomplete pass to Stallworth, and then Bradshaw sacked for a 1-yard loss, which is credited to Harvey Martin. There you go. Punt, fair catch. Dallas again, 1st and 10 on their own 48. Staubach goes way back, completes to Pearson, but it was only for 9 yards. It looks like it was going to be so much more when you go that far back, but it's only a 9-yard reception.
So Preston Pearson
go
was released by the Steelers after their 1974 Super Bowl season.
Yeah.
We didn't really have free agency or anything like that, but he was just outright released. And he came into this game as many players would do, right? Seeking vengeance on the team that let them go. He was a unique player both on the Steelers and with the Cowboys. He would stay with the Cowboys for a number of years. He was a sort of one of these early prototype, not say early, but a prototype sort of threat as a runner, but a very big threat as a receiver out of the backfield, especially on third down. And that was kind of his unique niche role. So we see him as a running back. We see him sort of featured with the kind of the collection running backs the Cowboys are using, but his real threat was as a receiver out of the backfield. And you saw it here. Just a little bit of background for folks about Preston Pearson, who's not the same as Drew Pearson.
Yeah, every time I sort of like had that, I had to put like a P or a D in front of everything.
They both are in the score sheet. They're both kind of keeping straight. But there's unique role, and this kind of history you had with both franchises is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, some awful center work here because we have another botched snap. Staubach recovers the fumble for no gain. So 2nd and 1 turns into 3rd and 1. But they still make something out of that. He finds Pearson again. Short for on a sideline pass, 7 yards. 1st and 10 on 36 for Pittsburgh on Pittsburgh 36. So it's looking pretty good. Gives to Newhouse for 2. And I wrote down here, we got a vanity shot here from the production where they're just zooming in on the Goodyear blimp. Like, look at this. And we got that Goodyear blimp. Apparently, the Goodyear blimp, for our Hall of Fame purposes, is a member of the College Football Hall of Fame class of 2019.
Yes.
I did not know that until my research. It is the first inanimate object to be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Tom Landry is the first inanimate object to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Good one.
I just thought of that now.
Good one. Good singer.
Yeah. Staubach passes to Pearson behind the line, broken up by Lambert, which is just good. Best that he didn't catch it. Yeah. 3rd and 8. Staubach is great here. He avoids two probable sacks and gets Charlie Young coming back. 14-yard completion. Young didn't do much here. He's only 3 seasons. This is his 2nd backup running back, but caught a pass in the Super Bowl. How's your life? Ain't better than his.
Exactly.
But it's worth a 1st down on the Pittsburgh 20 red zone, which when did we start calling it red zone? I don't know.
That's a good question for us to do some research on for next time, but it certainly was not back in this era.
No,
I don't remember it being a common nomenclature by analysts watching televising the games. No.
So I wrote down, has Dallas solved the Pittsburgh defense? It's like, no, they just got them mad. Andy Russell tackles Newhouse for a 2-yard loss. Staubach drops back, and the Steelers break through, and L.C. Greenwood gets the sack. 12-yard loss. Oof. I love L.C. Greenwood. We're going to be talking about him in a future show, an our thing, which we'll talk about in our plugging section.
Yeah.
Because you and I are a part of something that I'm very proud of. Actually, I'll discuss a bit of that with you at the end of the show with our Pro Football Hall of Fame Revisited.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. So 3rd and 14, and on shotgun, Summerall has what I wrote down, a very rare verbal miss. He's saying how the protection's going to work here, but it doesn't. Has to correct himself, and White comes up gets the sack, 13-yard loss. So we went from 1st and 20 to 3rd and God knows what on the 45.
So the Cowboys ran the shotgun pretty frequently. They did not create it. It was something that had been around the league for decades, but it wasn't something that was very common. And the Cowboys
credited with the shotgun.
I'm sorry.
Is Dallas credited with the?
Not now. I think it predates that. I think you will see it used as early back as the 50s, but they brought it back into the league, if you want to use that expression, and they used it quite frequently. So it kind of got reintroduced, and it was a tool. And they were the first team to really use it as a regular offensive formation. Nowadays, of course, it's very common but they sort of became infamous. And it's also a unique aspect about Tom Landry that people need to remember is he was an innovator on the offensive side as well. He was a defensive coach with the flex defense, and his playing career and his assistant coach career was on the defense, innovating, and was a proponent for the establishment of the 4-3 defense. But he also had a few tweaks on offensive play, and this was one of them. And I think it was to take advantage, perhaps a little bit of defenses outpowering offensive line and pressuring quarterbacks. And Staubach was a scrambler, and he could throw when he was scrambling. And the whole idea is setting him back, giving him a better look at the defense, giving him a little more room to move, so to speak. But as you just pointed out, of course, it doesn't always work. Fast defenses can chase quarterbacks down. But I think Landry's view was, I'll take that matchup of a defensive lineman trying to chase down Roger Staubach when I can get it, because they're probably thinking, the odds are in my favor that either Roger's going to get loose and get some yardage running, or he's scrambling and he hits a pass. But in this case, in fact, in this game, it was not as effective because the Steelers were still able to really get at Staubach. There's two key elements to this game, one of which we're going to highlight as we move along on the offensive side. The other one is I think Staubach was sacked 7 times in this game.
Yeah. It did.
Which partly, sometimes it's an issue of his play, and we mentioned the snap, but it's largely a mismatch between the defensive linebackers of the Steelers. And you can't really fault Staubach, Landry, the Cowboys, because you're facing this fantastic defense. And it played out. That defensive sack stat was a deciding factor, among another one, in this whole game.
Mm-hmm. Well, so they got a punt, and if you got a punt, it's about as good as you're going to get. Pittsburgh gets it on their own 6. So Blair cuts left for a rush up 2. Harris was lucky to get 2. 3rd and 6. Bradshaw, what did I write down? Show some guts. From the shallow end zone, launches to Lynn Swan, covered well by Mark Washington. So he beat Washington, but as our good friend Bill Carroll will say, sometimes you just get got. And Washington got. It wasn't so much of anything that he did, just Swan was better. 53-yard reception, 1st and 10 on the Dallas 37.
So here again, we've got the second, right, of these fantastic, huge receptions by Lynn Swan that were way, not just average, but outstanding catches in a Super Bowl. Again, something we see probably more frequently in today's game, but back then you just didn't see that frequency of that.
No,
and we're not quite done with Mr. Swan yet.
Oh God, no.
The Cowboys aren't done with him either.
No, I guess not. First play after the first down, Swan misses incomplete. 2-minute warning. After that, Blair gets a 7-yard run. Harris for 4, 1st and 10 on the Dallas 26. Bradshaw's great here. He avoids 2 possible sacks, finds Larry Brown in triple coverage, complete for 7, 2nd and 3. Hand off to Blair for that's no gain. Steelers call timeout with 32 seconds left, 3rd and 3. During the timeout, they mentioned how Jarella, and they mentioned how he's a Canadian. Yeah. Is 15 for 15 for 37 yards within. I don't know why they decided to say that he was a Canadian. You know where I'm going with this.
I'll let you go on. You're
there you go. Bradshaw went deep for Stallworth in the center of the end zone, but it was almost intercepted by D.D. Lewis. Tipped it. Mel Renfro almost got it, but didn't happen. 4th down, 36-yard field goal attempt. And from what Brookshire just told us, he's perfect in this range. Whap, whap.
Yeah.
He was not.
Well, what nobody knew until after the game, right, was that very first kickoff in the game when you highlighted, the Cowboys right start of the game with that reverse handoff.
Mm-hmm.
to Thomas Henderson, and he got down the sidelines, and the guy the last guy that tackled him out after a long kickoff
Gorilla, yeah.
was Guerra, who actually bruised his ribs on that play. And it
I
wouldn't
didn't
come out
know
till
that.
after the game. Yeah, it wouldn't come out till after the game, and you know, maybe it's an excuse, maybe it's not, but the inference was there that it affected the rest of the
No,
game.
it's a great excuse. I've had cracked ribs.
Yeah. And remember, guys, there's only one field goal kicker. The punters really probably aren't doing that. So if your kicker gets banged up, you're going to wrap him up, stick him with a needle, give him some pain pills, and push him back on the field, because you need him. And yeah, so that's kind of the history we would, and nobody knew that at the time. It wasn't, again, sideline
I
coverage.
didn't either.
And during televised games at that point, there's nobody in the sidelines reporting back up to the booth about, substitutions or injuries or anything like that. So nobody, for the most part, I don't think most people really knew what was going on. It wouldn't come out.
Or me in the research. I didn't know this.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Now, either that or they just made it all up so he wouldn't feel so bad for missing the field goals. But when you see him get hit out of bounds, and he's a small guy, and Thomas Henderson was a linebacker returning that kickoff to start the game, you can see why a small guy might get crushed and end up bruising his ribs, because we don't expect our kickers to take down big guys running back kickoff returns, but he had to. Yeah. He was the last man on that particular play. It was him or Hollywood Henderson would have been a lot further down the field, but he paid the price and maybe hurt him and hurt his ability throughout the rest of the game.
I mean, just even my civilian life, having a cracked rib, it's so goddamn painful. Yeah. It's like every time I thought, oh my God, I got to sneeze. Let alone,
you got to think for a kicker, although it's not his leg, but it's going to throw off a lot of the whole
absolutely.
play and the mental part of it. Yeah, can't be easy to trot out there in front of a bunch of big guys who are trying to push you down and get at you as a kicker, and having to kick the ball while your ribs are killing you in pain.
No, I didn't know that. Well, Dallas got first and 10 on their own 20, but it's only 22 seconds, so Newhouse just carries for 5. They're content to just go to the halftime, and why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You're up 10-7.
Halftime.
Yeah. Whoever did this kept the commercials here, so we got one for Champion Tires and Quaker State Oil. What am I right here? The guy who's selling Quaker State Oil is doing that in a house that he was apparently building. I don't know what that has to do with oil. It's pretty stupid.
So the basic theme here, right? We have commercials for guys who drink beer and are car guys fixing their house. Is that pretty much?
Well, I can get that. Okay. I'm building a house for myself, which has nothing to do with Quaker State Oil.
But I'm a guy building a house who drinks beer and has a car. Crazy.
Whatever. And then for the second straight Super Bowl, we got Andy Russell doing a PSA for United Way. All right, I like that. Back from commercial, we get the CBS team, the pre-team, Phyllis George, Irv Cross, and Brent Musburger. And for my purposes, that's the first crew I remember.
Yep.
They give a bit of analysis, and then Phyllis gets, I said, the dishonor of introducing Up With People. Okay, Simpsons fans, if you ever saw the episode where Homer's watching the Super Bowl and whatnot, and it's hooray for everything, they're parodying this. This was the worst shit I've ever seen.
So, Kurt, in preparing for today, I was looking forward to going over this game with you. I really was, and I knew we'd have a great time with it. But I'll tell you, I couldn't walk away without thinking, boy, I'm going to enjoy Kurt's play-by-play and interpretation of the halftime show. So go for it, buddy.
All right. Well, Phyllis tells us that they're all young kids from 40 states who have performed to audiences in 28 countries. I wrote captive audiences because can't be good. When I say captive audiences, I remember when Prince Philip, or I guess now King Philip, or whatever the fuck he is, came to Canada, and he had to watch a bunch of First Nations people here, which is fine. They're doing their performance, but it's throat singing. If you've never seen throat singing you've missed nothing. You want to cancel me for that? Cancel me for that. It's awful. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
and
it is.
It's like, I don't know what it is. Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, it's even worse than I thought it would be. They do original songs.
Mm-hmm.
There's a voiceover that talks about how America is celebrating to what you said, like in the bicentennial. The 200th birthday.
And we're not laughing at the centennial. We're laughing at the halftime, which for some producer and director, whoever was doing all this, thought, hey, this is the way we should honor America's 200th anniversary in 1976. When you think of all the other ways they could have done it, had some major celebrities, singers at the time and all kinds of things. They had to go down this path. Sorry, folks, but we happen to watch, as Kurt mentioned, not a telecast was just a game. We got to see the halftime show, and so sorry, we're gonna.
I'm glad we did.
A little bit about.
I've been wanting to. I've heard that this was awful. I never saw it before until this. So the voiceover comes up and says, "It's our 200th birthday, but it's nothing compared to what we've seen in Europe, Africa, and Asia. Some say we have come a long way, but some say we have a long way to go. But they're probably both right." And then they sing. They sing a song about America. There is their quote. She's just 200 years and just a baby, and someday she's going to be quite a lady. I'm not making this up.
Yes, folks. Kurt is not doing a parody here. He's not on The Simpsons, and he's not doing a parody. He's actually telling you play-by-play.
Another can of stuff, but yeah, go on.
So he's actually doing a play-by-play. This was, I mean, up until this time, we've kind of made some comments about the variety show kind of atmosphere around Super Bowl halftime shows.
In the 70s in general, but yeah.
High school bands and some stuff that was kind of neat for the time. But
we never saw it.
This is something entirely different. So, Kurt, away you go. We probably should cut this off at some point because we're spending an hour talking about this disaster.
No, I'm not. The voiceover comes back at, yes, 200 years, a nation made up of every race known under the sun. No, it wasn't. All had different music, and we evolved from the Charleston to the hustle or whatever the fuck, I don't know. We have 4 people like in, I guess, the top platform, and they're just dancing, and they start off with the Charleston. So they're going from some fiddling music to some jump blues, and then they go to Rock Around the Clock, and then it's Take Me Home, Country Roads, and then Good Morning America, how are you? And it's as they're just doing this pan around, it's like I think they feel like, look at this, we don't have just white people, we are showing some black people doing this, and some Asians and whatever. And I wrote down, I've always sort of like had an issue when leftist people say like, whiteness is a problem. No, I think you're right. Whiteness is a problem. There's no way some of these people wanted to do, or maybe they did. I don't know. Ends with Philadelphia Freedom by Elton John, and the dancers are making a shape of the Liberty Bell.
Kurt, was Elton John actually on the field?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. This is the other thing you need to remember. There weren't any superstar on the field singing any of this stuff.
Oh, my God.
Which might have made it a little more bearable. At least, hey, there's Elton John.
There's nothing bearable about any of this.
We're watching the halftime. Because that's how we think about
we haven't even described what they all look like, right? Because like you've got, they're all sort of like in solid colors, some like all mustard yellow.
Yeah, it's
turquoise, blue, green.
It's from a TV production point of view, it's awful. It looks awful. It sounds awful.
It is
There's
awful.
nothing redeeming except for the fact that they're trying to celebrate, again, no problem, celebrate America's 20th,
Sure.
or sorry, 200th anniversary, the bicentennial. But boy, I don't know how they could have pulled it off worse than this. Oh,
Well,
it's
with
bad. It's
22
bad.
eyes, we're looking at this like, and we just represented everybody who came here. Like,
Yeah.
Some
Didn't
didn't
do a
come
very
here
good
by
job.
choice. Let's just remember. And okay, all right, fine.
Yeah.
They finished with America the Beautiful, and balloons are released, and I just thank God that shit's over. Brent Musburger says, after seeing this, young people like that, I got a lot of confidence over the next 200 years. I do not. None of these people ever meant anything in life. And if you were part of that and you wanted to shit on us, direct it to me. Please do. I've had hate mail before. I've had a death threat before. So
yeah, and we're not trying to make. I don't think either one of us is trying to make any broad, sweeping cultural, social. Well, maybe, but even beyond that, just from a entertainment production point of view, right? It's terrible, terrible.
It is the worst thing. And I thought what was the most amazing thing is that the crowd all stayed. I would have been at the beer tent, like, watching this.
It's kind of crazy, yeah.
Admittedly, I'm a beer guy. If Rihanna was there, I would have been at the beer tent.
Well, maybe they thought this was going to be a big celebration, and then afterwards they're like, "What did we just watch?" When we could have been going and using the restroom and getting ourselves a cup of beer for the ready for the third quarter. We sat through that.
Like I told you, I watched it twice.
I bet you did.
I did. I sent it to somebody I do another show with, who's not a sports guy, who did not know that Up With People was a real thing. He heard of it, and we were just shooting the shit about that. And I said, like, no, this really happened. I guess they're trying to have time here, or kill time. So there's a montage of the Packers. I don't know why. But then once it sort of had Barbara Streisand's memories, I fast forward through. Like, I didn't watch any of it because I wrote down my cheese cup runneth over. I'm not watching this. I hate Barbara Streisand. At least the beer commercials is for the fans. There's nobody watching this at this point in the 76 thing. I really like Barbara Streisand. Well, maybe there was. I don't know. I doubt it. We get some more analysis from Brent and Phyllis. And here's a question for you. I asked this to Evan once, because Phyllis passed away a year ago or a year and so ago. When they did the NFL Today, was it NFL Today, I think? What was
CBS.
CBS. Okay, CBS. Okay.
Yeah,
which I said earlier in this, that this was the first pre-game program I remember. Irv Cross was probably, I don't know, but the first African-American pre-game analyst. Maybe? I don't know. Phyllis George was definitely the first woman. That's not debatable. Yeah. And I asked him, if they screwed up, who would it hurt worse? So I'm going to ask you that same question. Because I thought,
so your premise. So yeah, correct. So it was the NFL Today on CBS, and they were, unlike today where we got more networks and a lot of deal with pregame and
right, but there was no women.
Yeah, and of all of the entities, the two major networks at the time, right, NBC and CBS, the NFL Today by CBS, they were the crew for this, and that group you just mentioned would stay together for many, many years. And
in the early 80s.
Yeah. And really, for many of us who remember early pregame shows during the season and playoffs, and in this case, playoff games, Super Bowl and halftime, we remember fondly this grouping. So is your premise then, if this kind of concept of having this crew together didn't work, who of the three would have been?
Not Brent. Brent would have been fine. I'm just saying, like, who was it more important to? Like, if Phyllis couldn't do it, or if Irv couldn't do it, because we're talking 76, another white guy would have been fine, right? But there was no female analyst or in any capacity, there was, if there was, and I apologize because I don't know if there was, I don't remember, well, I wouldn't remember. I don't know if there was any African American before or cross on this level.
Probably, probably not.
And they were both great in that, in
Yeah.
their role.
So, Phyllis George was a Miss America.
Yeah.
You're right. She really became the first female sportscaster that we would see on national broadcasts like this, and actually started in 1974, and then in 75 she became a member of this co-host live pre-games that were on the CBS games during the 1975 season, and they held the rights to the Super Bowl. So I would suspect that, yeah, I don't know who else would have filled that role at the time. Maybe there would have, but and then certainly this is what she's remembered for. This is where it launched her into her career in media. I mean, at that time, women who were Miss America, it was a pretty high profile sort of thing, but she was able to take that and move it way beyond into a whole new career, and very innovative to have a woman having such a high profile in NFL sports broadcasting it was quite a unique thing, and I don't know whether anybody else would have been able to do the same. That combination of the background and the experience of the three of them, and then they were, together for so many years.
Give me the Greek too, because he was
yeah.
I guess he wasn't then, but yeah, it's just sort of interesting now because, like, as you and I, here we are in our 50s, and like women sportscasters to us, well, to you and I can't speak for everybody, but I really don't give a shit as long as you're good.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the case. She faced a lot of resistance. The network did. I suspect the league did for having a network partner that gave such a high profile weekly opportunity in terms of the pregame show on CBS and a game as big as this. So really, truly innovator and groundbreaker and I think if you probably talk to any other woman broadcaster who grew up in the 70s or became a point in their career maybe in the 80s and 90s who aspired to be at the level of broadcaster involved with the NFL as a media or broadcast partner, I suspect almost every one of them would point back to Phyllis George.
Okay. Yeah, just curious your thing, because again, as a kid, when that's your first thing, if you see your white guy, your black guy, your woman, okay, that's what it is.
Yep.
And I think there's something to that in terms of equity and representation. And looking back, Phyllis George never embarrass herself. And lack of knowledge.
Class lady.
Absolutely. All right. Start of the second half. Dallas kicks off. Blunt's drilled on the tackle, but still first down and 26. Harris rushes for 3, gets it again, but there's nowhere to go. It's a 5-yard loss. Harvey Martin gets a tackle for loss. 3rd and 12. Bradshaw is incomplete to Larry Brown. Cliff Harris was just all over him and just didn't have a shot. Zeros up to punt. Fair catch called, and Dallas got first and 10 on their own 42. The pitches to Preston Pearson gets upended by a rushing Mel Blount. We're seeing a lot more of safety rushes or cornerback rushes. I wrote down he rushed up and sort of like gave him a back body drop. I'm a pro wrestling guy, so
I know what you mean. Yeah, I get. Yep. That's probably a good description of it for our folks who are trying to figure out what we're talking about.
Yeah, there you go. Works. We'll add a video here. Thanks, Ted, for doing all that. Dennison goes straight ahead for 3, 3rd and 7. Staubach goes back for a pass, tries to go long, intended for Golden Richards, picked off. JT Thomas, and he saw it the whole way. The thing against Staubach was purely JT. Pittsburgh's got 1st and 10 on the Dallas 25. Well, this should be huge. Will it be?
Well, and as we've seen, if you follow the play as we've been doing here, the Cowboys are struggling, right, to really move the ball on offense. Their running game was by committee. In fact, we're talking about later, one of the outcomes from this game that Laundry noted that he had to improve the running game, and they would do that next year. We'll talk about that later. In 2 more years. So Staubach's a good quarterback. He's a good passing. As we talked, he's Roger the Dodger. So you get to a point, I think, in the game where he's carrying the offense on his shoulders, which he often would. And if you can't run the ball, as we see many times in today's game, right, I don't see me desperate, but you're starting to push the ball on a passing. And again, Staubach's not a terrible quarterback, but in this game, he's getting pressured a lot. He's getting sacked a lot. We're talking about bot snaps from the center, which is probably a reflection of that defensive rush coming at the offensive line to center. And watch the game, you realize it wasn't because he necessarily was a bad quarterback. He had to kind of go all in to beat this great defense. And when you try to do that and push things, and again, this was not his fault, but we're seeing a situation where he's just trying to get the offense moving, because we're talking about a running game on the Dallas side that really isn't going very far. And their touchdown came earlier in the game, right, after a turnover with a quick touchdown pass. They haven't really established dominance, which, given what we talked about with the Steelers defense, shouldn't be surprising, but it is playing out in the game. The Cowboys are struggling on offense to maintain drives and get first downs.
Right. Well, you think it was going to be huge. Harris rushes for 3, then for 6, 3rd and 1. They give back to Harris, and it's another 2. First down for Pittsburgh on Dallas 16. All right, should be good. Fake reverse fails, but Too Tall is credited for a 2-yard tackle for loss. Oof, man, it's Too Tall. Just anything he does, whether it's better than anyone else, just feels better than anyone else.
Well, this is another one of these common football plays, even today, that really annoys me. This is when I'm screaming or looking for something to throw on my TV. Because you have a quarterback, right? So here we are. You've got a quarterback, you've got the ball, you're in the red zone, right?
Mm.
And you don't want to take a sack. Don't take a sack. Throw the ball away, but you're here. You're only losing 2 yards, but you're losing it down. But it's just one of these things that always irks me. Like, I know they're trying to make something happen out of nothing, and they want to score that touchdown, but just kind of a sigh that he's taking that 2-yard loss, which, when you're 1st and 10 on the 14-yard line of your opponent, right? You want to close the deal here. Let's hope they do.
Oh, absolutely. 2nd down, Dallas blitzes, but Bradshaw overthrows Swan. 3rd and 12. Throws the end zone for Swan, who was covered expertly by Washington. Washington, I felt bad for him because Swan overplayed him, but it wasn't because Washington was crap.
Yeah, it's a classic example, and we see it right in Super Bowls, of a player who's a good player, right? Maybe even had a good or average game, but when you're on the losing end of a couple big plays that get played over for decades, you're kind of looked at the reason why the Cowboys lost the game in this case as we go on. But he wasn't, but you kind of carry that image but he held his own, but Swan would be the better player on a couple of occasions, as we see. Mm-hmm. And it made him look, I think, worse as a player than he really was. He was a good average player, and he was up against some really good receivers, obviously, in Bradshaw, as we talk about emerging and using the passing game as a true threat. And the Cowboys can't score points, right?
Yeah.
Defense is constantly trying to stay in the game, which is tough.
Well, Jarrell is coming in for a 33-year-old. Did I do that last time too? 33-yard field goal attempt. Blame Canada. Blame Canada. We missed it. So, same score.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the thing. Like that was like too in his range based on what we were told he missed. And so like he very easily could have been the person never to come back to Pittsburgh. He could have got like stayed in Canada for the rest of his life based on what was happening here. Very lucky.
What happened after he missed this field goal?
We'll get there. Yeah. All right. So we see Jack. Oh yeah. So while this is happening, Jack Lambert's throwing down Cliff Harris. Brutal takedown. Impressive pop up, but no penalty. Huh.
So this is probably the second most famous play from this game.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you watch it, Cliff Harris, who again was a huge intimidator, and he was trash talking, as many players are today and then, and he was trying to exert some intimidation, and right, and he went up after this field goal was missed, and what did he do? He patted the field goal kicker sort of on the helmet, probably said something, sarcastic or something, and when you watch it, Lambert was sort of off to the side a little bit, but he wasn't like right in his face, but he clearly saw or heard, and he wasn't the intimidator we talked about earlier, was not taking any of that.
Oh yeah, he's not having any of that.
And it wasn't like he just went over and grabbed Harris, by the collar and kind of like got in his face or no, and he's not going to wind up and punch him or hit him. He grabs a guy like he's a rag doll, right? And just throws him down on the ground and walks away. And of course, Harris pops up, and the first person he's looking for, right, isn't Jack Lambert. The first person he's looking for, right, is a referee. Like, did you just see what he did to me? And I think there's a bit of John back and forth there a little bit, and the ref, and I think Lambert, as I recall, kind of just walked right off the field. And yeah, but
you can do that. You can't do that now.
Refs are like, well, whatever, yeah, awesome. Maybe you should, whatever. I don't know what the conversation was, but there was no kind of like, that we need to penalize Lambert for unsportsmanlike conduct. Because the second guy is the guy who usually always gets the penalty in something like this, right? But in this case, no, Jack's walking off the field, and he made his point. And after the game, they will talk that this was actually a turning point to some degree, because it did allow the Steelers to continue their image, but actually their effort to be the intimidator and not stand for any of this. And I suspect probably like it would in many cases, right, get the bench and the Steelers all hyped up, for Harris taking a cheap shot at some guy that apparently was injured. Not cheap shot, but kind of like, egging him on after he missed a field goal. And Jack Lambert to stand up and get back at him and not get penalized for it. It's like I say, it's the second most famous play in this game.
Do not mess with Jack Lambert.
No, and I don't think that was Cliff Harris's intent. Cliff Harris was also a tough guy, hard-hitting safety, which was common in the 70s. Free safeties would roam the field with the idea that receivers were to be hunted down. But he was outmatched in terms of his size. And I don't think he expected and maybe didn't realize that on special teams, on a field goal attempt, he probably should have been aware that Jack Lambert on the field. Well, he quickly discovered, if you had not remembered in preparing for the game, that Jack Lambert played a role on special teams when the Steelers were attempting field goals, and he was right there. Yeah.
Well, we got Dallas at 1st and 10 on their own 20. Pearson rushes Preston Pearson for 9. Newhouse for 2. First down on their own 31. Newhouse in the next play stuffed immediately for no gain. Gets 6 on a draw. 3rd and 4. Well, Pittsburgh blitzes. And Staubach avoids 2 yards. Gets 3, but it's not enough. Like you said, Roger the Dodger. Like It's really impressive to watch him play. But Dallas got a punt. Before that, we see Walter Cronkite, and he's sitting behind Brent Musburger. Okay. And I wrote down, damn, I missed real news. Kind of what we talked about before. So, all right. The punt is good, small return. Pittsburgh's got first and 10 on their own 24. Franco rushes for 3. Bradshaw completes for Lynn Swan on the sideline, and it's enough to get a first down on the 39. Flyer for 3, Harris for 6, 3rd and 1. Bradshaw passes for, what did I say here? Crap, Brown. There we go. Brown, he's smothered. Gets nothing. They're gonna have to punt. Dallas will start on the first and 10 on their own 18 after for a catch. Newhouse rushes for 6. Pearson gets 3. But on 3rd and 1, Newhouse doesn't get enough. We're going back and forth here. Dallas first and 10 on their own 29. And they show an insert, little production here of Landry. And Summerall says, yeah, the reason he looks so serious is that he's always thinking about the next play. I don't think it would make a difference.
I wouldn't think so either, but
yeah, and then I wrote down, like, does he ever look jovial? Pearson rushes for 3. Staubach steps back, finds Newhouse alone on the sidelines. 8-yard pass, first down. First and 10 on their own 39. Next play, pocket retracts along with the front 4. Staubach has daylight, and he rushes. Well, it's only for 2. Doesn't seem like much, but it was pretty impressive when I look at that play. But there's a flag thrown, clipping on Newhouse, and holy shit here, Paul, we actually get to see what it was.
Yeah, and which is we've been complaining about that before. And there were only 2 penalties in this entire game.
That's it?
I believe so. I'll go back and double check, but I had that in my notes. I think only the Cowboys had 2, and the Steelers but didn't have any, I believe. That is correct. So,
yeah, because like nowadays we'll see like 4 shots on any penalty.
Yeah, so here's an opportunity to because we often complain they really didn't spend much time reflecting, going back and looking. And here they have a rare chance in the game that had very few penalties to actually spend a little bit of time, anyways, right? Doing some analyzing and thinking about penalty call in this case, which would be pretty significant. It hurts the Cowboys a bit in terms of momentum and what they're trying to do here.
So we have Dallas first and 23 on their own 26. Staubach doesn't see anybody, but he still rushes for 6. 2nd and 17. Newhouse gets 2. 3rd and 15. Staubach in the shotgun. Finds Pearson for 14. One shy. But it's the end of the quarter. Dallas 10, Pittsburgh 7.
Yeah, so we've got a scoreless third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
We've had, I think the third quarter started a little rough, right? Both teams kind of stumbling, bumbling, short possessions back and forth. We got the missed field goal. We got a few things, but kind of the game. The game kind of lulls a little bit here in that third quarter, and that's why again, not to kind of, yeah, and not to kind of go over, but that's probably another reason why Cliff Harris getting ripped down by Jack Lambert is not only a highlight of the quarter in the game, but also maybe is again a reflection, kind of a shift of momentum a little bit towards the Steelers that we don't quite see yet, but it kind of maybe shakes the game up a little bit, if you want to use that expression. So,
sure. But with 15 minutes left to play, if you're a Dallas fan and you're a Pittsburgh fan, you both think you have a shot. And that's what we've seen, really, right? In terms of 50-50.
I think we had a couple of Super Bowls that we've covered that it's been close. going into fourth quarter, but I think in those games there still had been at that point a real dominant team. Maybe had not cashed in all of the points, right? Missed field goals, some other things in earlier previous Super Bowls that were close going into the fourth quarter. But I think you're right. This is, I think, the first Super Bowl, right, in which the game is close in a lot of ways that any one of these teams could win it. Yes, the Steelers' defense is holding tight. Staubach is getting sacked, and he's got the turnover, and the Steelers have the missed field goals. But I think we've got our first Super Bowl, right, where legitimately fans on either side could say, we're not being dominated enough that we can't win this game in this quarter. If the ball bounces right and we do the right things, we don't make any mistakes, either one of these teams, which is why we've got ourselves a great game.
Yeah. So first play of the fourth quarter, Dallas is punting, and Pittsburgh almost gave it up. Brown fumbled, but JT Thomas recovers it. Pittsburgh 1st and 10 on their own 17. Okay, so let's see what they can do. Bradshaw passes on first down, has a wide open Harris for 26 yards. Could have been a touchdown, but Harris just stepped over the line, which is, from what we saw, it's the right play or the right call. He did not, shouldn't have gone like any further. Like that, they got this right, which is interesting too, because like we talk about, like as we're doing this more and more, replays are such a big deal, but live time they got it right.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh 1st and 10 on their own 43. Bradshaw again goes deep, overthrows Stallworth, who had Renfro beat barely. So we haven't talked a lot about Renfro here today, but Renfro was very, very good. Harris gets it, but he's tackled behind the line, 2-yard loss from Jethro Pugh. Love that name. 3rd and 12. The Dallas rush breaks through immediately. Bradshaw's on the run, push out of the bounds, but gets still managed, but it's a 14-yard sack. Oof. Randy White. Yeah. We haven't talked about him yet, but he's the one who gets the credit for the sack.
Yeah, so Randy White, the Cowboys' #1 draft pick in 1975 this season, came in with the intent. Landry envisioned him as the next great Cowboys middle linebacker. Leroy Jordan was towards the end of his career, but it wasn't long. I think this season he still played linebacker, but as his career would move on, and we'll talk much more about him in later shows, Landry then realized that he's actually even a better fit as that key defensive tackle position for the Cowboys, basically trying to replace Bob Lilly, who retired before this particular season.
Your favorite guy.
And that's where Randy White would become a Hall of Fame player, a linebacker drafted to play middle linebacker, who after his rookie season and the next year would eventually be moved to defensive tackle. But we see him in this game, a little bit of an early snippet of the greatness of what would become Randy White.
Is that your favorite all-time Cowboy? Like, or is it Bob Lilly? Like your personal favorite?
It's tough. I mean, Bob Lilly, personally, Roger Staubach. Yeah. Roger Staubach.
Okay.
But when you do your top Cowboys of all time,
and I have.
Or anybody does, there is only one. And there are many to choose from, but there is only one, and that is Mr. Cowboy, Bob Lilly. And the reason I say that is, along with Mean Joe Green, in my view, on the Mount Rushmore of defensive tackles is Bob Lilly. So if you have a player in your franchise who's viewed as among the top 2 or 3 players at their position in NFL history, to me, and the fact that he was their #1 draft choice, first #1 draft choice, and would become their first All-Famer, first Pro Football Hall of Famer, and have a distinguished career. Again, he's not in this game, Bob Lilly, but to me, he is the greatest Cowboy, and he will be Chuck Howley's presenter this weekend at Canton.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay,
they're good friends.
Okay. Okay, crap. Where to leave off here?
So I think we just got the large sack.
Hmm.
I'm going back finding my notes here. This is the sack. Bradshaw for 14. So we've got 4th and 26 on the Pittsburgh 27, and the Steelers punter booms a punt out. I mean, I've got my notes 59 yards. Today, we would all be going, holy crap, that is a huge punt. Back then, even more so. And it's as we know the game, right? This is you're shifting, right? You're shifting the field position significantly right here. And I think, well, we'll go on, but I think it did have an impact in terms of how the game plays out when you shift the line of possession in such a way. So that's where we're at. We're at Cowboys 1st and 10 at their own 19 after that punt.
Oh, first time on 19. Okay, I might be where to leave off here. Oh, there we
go. Second drive of the fourth quarter.
Yep. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I wrote down what best be described as a flea flicker, and they said it was a flea flicker. I haven't seen that before at that point. Well, it didn't work. Staubach was lucky to only lose a couple yards here, so going on here. Give some love to Steve Furness, who backup defensive tackle, got the tackle on this. Furness was on all 4 Super Bowl wins for the Steelers. 47 games started, 47 games out of 97, so pretty good. All right. So when we go from here, Denison gets nothing on 2nd and 11. We see that Richards is trying to move Blunt a bit on extracurricular activity. Didn't work. Ignored by the refs, and Richards gets the worst of it. 3rd down, Staubach is on shotgun. Gets nothing, sacked by Elsie. Whamp, whamp. 4th and 12 on their own 16. Hups will be punting shallow from his own end zone. Pittsburgh blocks the punt. Whoa. The production here wasn't great, so you don't really see how it was sort of like broken through. We do get a wide shot of the field and sort of like the panic that everyone had in the end zone. What we know is blocked by Reggie Harrison, who deflects back in the end zone. Like this is where I wish we had like better production, but
yeah,
you gotta take what we have.
Well, and more so because it's kind of a key play, right? Because obviously, for folks, I understand how things are playing out here. The Cowboys are, we got a tight game, and yes, they're deep in their own side of the field at that large punt, and then you give up. You have the punt is blocked, the safety, and you get up to 2 points. Plus, you got to kick the ball back to the Steelers, so you lose the momentum, and things are shifting. And we're still early in the fourth quarter, but the momentum has really shifted back over to the Steelers side. Well, and the back and forth is continuing, but the Steelers right up now, they sort of have the edge because they got the ball on a short field.
Yeah. So it's a 10-9 game here for Dallas. For the Super Bowl, this is huge. On the free kick, Mike Collier returns it for 25. Nice pickup. It's his last game for Pittsburgh. He would play 2 more years for Buffalo. So Pittsburgh's got 1st and 10 on the Dallas 45. Harris rushes for 5 on the outside. Blyer kind of gets the same, but not quite. So it's 3rd and less than 1. It's kind of goal line formation, but works out. Pitch to the outside, rushes for 7. Catches Dallas off guard. Pittsburgh 1st and 10 on the Dallas 49. Looks pretty good. Next rush, not so much, as Too Tall crushes the man. Crushes.
Yeah. But you can see what the Steelers are trying to do here, right? They're running the ball, right? We're seeing that all game. a lot of small runs, but they're moving the ball, they're protecting the ball. This is sort of the mantra here. And in these early Super Bowls of the Steelers, one of the unsung units of this team that doesn't really get much credit is the offensive line. I mean,
Right.
the previous Super Bowl, right? They set that then record of total rushing yards in the previous Super Bowl than this one. And Franco Harris was the MVP of that game. Set the all-time at that time set the NFL record for most rushing yards by a running back in a Super Bowl, and yet they don't really have any. Mike Webster would emerge here in the end of the dynasty in the 70s as their premier center, but other than that, but they're holding their own against a pretty good defense, and they're able to do that and give some protection to Bradshaw. But they're able to run the ball, and that's what the Steelers are trying to do, and it makes wise strategy here because the game's still close.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next rush is not good. Blyer's crushed by too tall. Bradshaw, what looks like a designed run, does not do much on the right, but still gets 9 yards. 3rd and 1 on the 20. They give it to Franco, but the handoff is botched. So would another, basic things that should circle back happen. Looked like he was still able to get some kind of progress, but we still have a first down, barely. At this point, though, they've got no confidence in Janela. Janela? Yeah. Because at this point, it would have been a 36-yard attempt. Summerall doesn't think they're going to go that right, and he's right. Because they missed from the same spot twice. Before that, we got a timeout. 8:54 to play. Janela will, but they're going to bring him on. I didn't think they would.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't think they would. Gets a kick and it's good. Pittsburgh 12, Dallas 10. And Janela is an interesting character here.
Yeah.
Half great, half shit.
Yeah. And so we need to give the kicker a little bit of love here. Because you're right. I mean, it's an interesting strategy. You're down by 1. It's 3rd and 1 on Dallas's 20. Sorry, 4th and 1 on Dallas's 20. And it's an interesting strategy, right? You don't have maybe full confidence in your kicker, and maybe he's injured, and do you go for it with the idea that if you get it, you're holding the ball at least, you're going to burn down some more time, maybe have a chance for a touchdown or a closer field goal. But the decision here is to go for the field goal and trust your kicker, and it paid off for the Steelers. They take the lead in the game.
Yeah, Pittsburgh 12, Dallas 10. And from a guy who was,
yeah,
from what we know. Alrighty, he kicks off. Pearson muffs it, unfortunately, but recovers it. Dallas got 1st and 10 on their own 15. Staubach drops back for a pass. Wagner intercepts or runs it back 18 yards. And it wasn't so much Staubach, it wasn't his fault from what I could see. I wonder if you think the same thing. He was just focused.
So apparently this was the same play that the Cowboys scored on from Staubach to Pearson in the first quarter, and it was a play that they had been doing successfully through the season.
Mm-hmm.
And after the game, they were asking about this play, and Staubach said something to the effect, "Well, it's the first time it didn't work for us. It was one of our go-to." And they interviewed Wagner, and he said, "Yeah, we prepared for this. We kind of got burned in the first quarter with it. I was out of position, but this time I wasn't." That was kind of his story behind it, and they were ready for it. And this is probably an example when we criticize play callers, right? Is you don't go dipping in the well too often. If you've got tendencies, you want to try to avoid them. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got favorite plays you want to use, but maybe here's a classic example from a play calling perspective of the Cowboys maybe going back to that one. Again, wasn't the right way, especially deep in their own territory, even though it had been a successful play. And Staubach and Pearson have had a history in their careers of hitting big plays at key times, and maybe that was kind of but it burned them here.
Mhm.
Huge momentum shift we got going right here in the game.
Yeah, because it looked like this was going to work, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, Staubach said it's worked all season for them.
Mhm.
This time it didn't.
No, no, it didn't. So the Steelers got first and goal on the Dallas 7. Blyer rushes for 4. Bradshaw looks to go outside, has to get back for 2. Harris gets a carry, fumbles, but gets it back. Fourth and goal on the 1. Garella, whatever, fuck, comes here, gets a field goal. Pittsburgh 15, Dallas 10.
So again, back-to-back Steeler opportunities, right? Where one might think about a short down, fourth down, and maybe think about a real momentum changer and getting a touchdown. But in both cases, Chuck Noll and the Steelers decide to trust their kicker, who had had a rough game. And here you go. The guy has kicked 2 back-to-back short field goals. And this case has allowed them to extend that lead to 15-10. So interesting strategy rather than go for the so-called throat with a pass or attempt to get a first down and a touchdown. The Steelers are just trying to gradually add on these points. I think the thought is for our defense, a 5-point lead is going to be tough for the Cowboys to come back from. It's got to be the mindset.
Well, let's see if it is. Kickoff returned by Preston Pearson on 29. Dallas first and 10 on their own 24. Completes Newhouse, screen pass for 4. Second 6, Staubach drops back. Line collapses, and he's almost sacked by Dwight White, but it's enough of a distraction. LC Greenwood to sort of like move in. 9-yard loss. Third and 15. Staubach recovers 10 of that with a pass to Charlie Young. Because basically they were playing defense. He just allowed that to happen. Golden Richards is down and hurt, but we don't know why. Turned out it was Edwards just like spinning around, but we don't really see why exactly he was hurt. Like, do you see something that I didn't see?
No. Again, the coverage just moves beyond that. You can't really figure out. And Golden Richards would be a pretty decent second receiver for the Cowboys, but he would have injury. He was more of a slight, fast white guy, actually, with a thin build. So he would struggle with injuries all through his career. And I have a very significant highlight in a later Super Bowl. But he struggled. He was their second wide receiver and punt returner, and he would occasionally have some big plays for the Cowboys in his career, but he struggled with injuries, and which would later we're getting into him in another Super Bowl because it would cause some problems for him for the rest of his life. We won't get into today.
All right, so third tier wide receiver.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Punt. Pittsburgh will have first and 10 on their own 30. Franco is going to get the ball, as they should. Franco for 4, Franco for 2. We've got an offense. Then we have our offensive play of the game. Bradshaw drops back. Oh, it's so good. His O-line is just hanging on. Dallas is up here. Sorry. Dallas, they're pass rushing well. Great safety blitz. Gives him enough protection, and he goes deep. And it might have been the longest throw of his life. Lynn Swann has a step ahead of Washington, and we said Washington has done well. Touchdown, though. Pittsburgh touchdown. We have to go see that Bradshaw's down and hurt help with the field. This is the play of the game.
Yes.
So let's do a deep dive here. Terry Bradshaw went back, did the whole deep thing for Lynn Swann. Swann made it, and that does not happen much in the 70s. But destroyed. Terry Bradshaw is mental jello from what we see.
So
but yeah, go ahead.
Folks who are watching, this is very typical, right, of a big pass play in this era, and which we mentioned will happen. Doesn't happen as frequently as it does today. But here's the difference between 1975 and 2022-23 seasons is the risk reward business here, right? So we already saw Swan, fantastic receiver in his second year. He's already had 2 big catches. He's created a highlight reel for himself already in this game that would live on for history. And here he is here with the 64-yard touchdown. I don't know where the safety help was that we talk about. He burned Washington again, whatever. I don't know the coverage. I haven't looked at it close enough. But at any rate, that's what we see. But here's the flip side of it. And this is why, you maybe didn't see as much. Well, you didn't see as much of this kind of pass play. Or if you did, this was often all unfortunately the outcome is the quarterback is laid out because there's nothing to protect him. There's no penalty. This is just a way that game is played. Staubach would have a series of concussions, a variety of plays, not just this kind of thing, throughout his career as well. Many of these great quarterbacks and other players, as we know, the history of concussions in the NFL, plagued a lot of guys, but particularly at wide receiver, running back, and at quarterback. And this is a pretty significant series, and today, well, I guess then, but today, a scary thing to see. Because, he was really laid out and had a hard time getting off the field. I mean, it's brutal. Yeah, it's brutal. We think about that a lot differently today, right? And fortunately, we see less of that today, although it can still happen, as we know. We've seen it in the last few years, but at that time, that was the risk reward kind of scenario where you didn't have as much protection and the passing game was not really well developed. Your offensive line was less structured towards pass protection as your whole offensive strategy was, and more towards the run. And this is the weak link, right? This is the vulnerability a quarterback would face. And it was, unfortunately, I hate to say it, that it was sort of part of the game at the time.
No, it was.
Yeah.
This gave Swan 4 receptions for 161 receiving yards, record at the time.
Yeah.
Reception and pass.
Really fascinating.
I had to go back to, and you probably did too. I guarantee you did. That because like the next thing was we saw Bradshaw like carried off the field, right, like a mannequin, or like a puppet, but we never saw how we got pounded. But NFL films showed how that occurred.
Yeah, it is something of the era that we're all of us who are fans now, or go back and look at these games, or reflect upon being fans at the time. I think a lot of us lament maybe and think back about that. That was the way the game was played. Nobody's making any excuses for it, but there is a level of uncomfortness, whether you're a fan for either team. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you're seeing something that is pretty terrible to watch, and you're realizing that it was sort of, I wouldn't say accepted, but it was part of the game. It would happen. And it wasn't something that was managed very well from every aspect.
But did it look like a helmet to helmet at that point? No.
Yeah. I don't know, but the same kind of things you see today, right? I mean, either helmet down, or a guy's getting pile drived right into the ground, defenseless, going backward, and his head snaps back, right, and hits the ground. And again, we still see some of that today, although the effort of rule calling and everything is to take much of that out for that defensive player being pounded against the turf or the ground. But you see it here in a high-profile game with a play in it and a catch that obviously was a touchdown, a big play, so it elevates it to something like, oh my gosh. And then we have the Steelers are taking that 21-10 lead with over 3 minutes left in the game. Sorry?
3:02 to go, so this isn't over.
Isn't over, but we've got to start. The starting quarterback is for all purposes, as far as we can tell, out of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so Berkshire leaves the booth because he thinks he's going to the winning locker. Well, he is going to the winning locker room.
Yep.
Who that is going to be. Hank Stram comes on, and
I love Hank Stram.
so do I. Yeah, so do I. I do. Dallas has got 1st and 10 on their own 20, and we see a very hurt Bradshaw.
Yeah.
I think it's almost off. They were essentially carrying him away.
Yeah.
Terry Bradshaw had no hair.
Yeah, we'll let our viewers think about that when they see Bradshaw these days. But yeah, yeah, that doesn't look good. It's a bad. It looks terrible. The whole.
Here's the interesting thing. So, like, let's put this in a 1976 point of view. They say Bradshaw's got a concussion. A 1976 concussion.
And so it's again, it's almost as if they think Bradshaw has broken the thumb on his passing hand.
Right.
I mean, it's. I think they recognize the seriousness of it, but it's almost. I wouldn't say cavalier. That's not what I mean, but it's almost like, yeah, he's injured, he's out, and there's less about. We're not thinking about, what's going to happen next. Now, as you mentioned earlier when we prefaced this game, right? Lynn Swann didn't play throughout the season. He had a concussion. So concussions were part of the game. As I mentioned, Staubach had suffered some of these earlier and later in his career, and other players. So it wasn't like it was unknown. I don't mean that people were downplaying it, but in many respects, unlike today, we see it as a much more significant, serious, short, long-term health issue for a player. Then it's like an injury that took him out of the game, just as if he had broken a leg or broken a thumb on his passing hand. We see the seriousness of it, but the significance isn't played up or isn't really emphasized. That's my kind of point.
No, absolutely. That makes total sense.
Imagine if this happened in last year's Super Bowl. People just think about that. If this had happened in last year's Super Bowl, what would emerge from that during the game? And it would just be, here it's not quite the same level. I don't mean lack of concern, but the same level, I guess, of significance or impact. Yeah. But he's out of the game, which is an impact for sure.
Mm-hmm. Where would we leave off here?
So Dallas has got the ball, 1st and 10 of the Dallas 20. Cowboys are down by 11. Staubach can bring teams back. He has had a history in his career of comebacks. We talked about the Hail Mary game earlier in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So the Steelers and the Steelers fans still have to be a little careful. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a team can come back 11 points in 3 minutes, but Staubach has done this before in his career. So we got to watch how this is going to play out.
Okay. All right, so Staubach passes to Young for 7. Passes again for Pearson for 30 yards on a Sutherland route. 1st and 10 on their own on Pittsburgh's 43. Pearson gets the catch on the other sideline, 11 yards. All right, we're done. Dallas 1st and 10 on the Pittsburgh 32. Then we see Bradshaw leaving for the locker room, and that stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's awesome that Terry Bradshaw is as intelligent as he is, but based on this tackle.
And he's not putting up, even by the measures of 1975, right? He's not putting up great numbers as a quarterback in this game. But when I go over the stats at the end, you're going to see how this is highlighted. Those key catches, those big plays. We are seeing the evolution of Terry Bradshaw into the quarterback and a passing quarterback that would help carry this team through the rest of that dynasty. But unfortunately, at this point in time, he's just unable to make a go of it, and he's off the field. So,
mm-hmm. All right, so we got Staubach sacked for 2 yards, 2-minute warning. Next play, Staubach is going deep back for Percy Howard. but finds him in the end zone.
Yep.
Touchdown.
Down. 34-yard touchdown. The extra point is good. And it's 21-17. We're under 2 minutes. But it ain't over. Again, I think the fans on both sides on TV and in the stadium are probably realizing, I mean, the Steelers are probably a little confident, but I don't think they're celebrating quite yet. I wouldn't be, and they probably aren't, because they know what Roger can do if he gets the ball back. So if you're the Steelers, we all know the strategy here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going to get the kickoff back, and what are you going to do? You're going to burn time. You're going to try to get a first down. How does that go for them, Kurt?
Here we go. Here we go. Pittsburgh 21, Dallas 17. So lots of time. Dallas is all 3 timeouts. So obviously not over. Outside kick. Cover really easily. Pittsburgh is 1st and 10 on the Dallas 47. Here's something interesting. Terry Harantry. Do I have that right?
Yeah. All
right. Terry Harantry comes in as quarterback. Terry Harantry is solid backup. That's the way I can sort of like do that. And it's sort of like, who the hell is this guy? Was with Pittsburgh since '69. Started at least 17 games. Only 2 snaps this season. This would be his last game with the Pirates. With the not Penguins. It was the Steelers. And I did what he could.
Yeah. But you know, again, we have a team with, you know, a little bit of experience at backup quarterback, but not much to go on there. But all he really has to do, right, is don't make a mistake.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Don't fumble. Don't, you know, we're just going to try to burn the clock and get a first down here. So he's in a good position to do that. And I think everybody watching the game, the millions watching the game in the, 80,000 in the stands, are thinking he is not going to throw the ball.
Yeah, and he didn't. Right after this, this is his last game as a Steeler. He would eventually play for Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Where did nothing. And when we say Tampa Bay was their inaugural season where they might be the worst team ever.
Yeah, and you know his claim to fame is a college player. I looked him up, and he was a 3-year starter and twice All-American at Notre Dame, and a Heisman Trophy candidate. And he helped lead Notre Dame to the national championship in 1966. By the way, he was also a teammate and friend of Rocky Bleier, who also played at Notre Dame before they came team. But he's one of these highly coveted. He was a 2nd-round pick in 1969 and would serve out, as you say, largely as a backup. And but boy, he has a national championship with Notre Dame, 2 Super Bowl rings he would earn. And then he would spend his last season playing for the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which, oh well, one more season in a career, but that much of a highlight there.
That is what it is.
Just don't throw the ball.
Our next 3 plays, best you can have. 3 carries, all first downs, all for out of bounds. What we got here?
Harris short for 2.
Mm-hmm.
2nd and 12, Harris for 2. 3rd and 10, Breyer for 1 yard. So we all know what the Steelers are trying to do. So, Kurt, here we are. It's 4th and 9 on the Dallas 41-yard line. You're the Steelers. Yep. I'm in at 28. You've got a 4-point lead. If you're the Steelers, what are you going to do? Punt.
Yeah, they're going to punt, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to punt, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do they do?
Well,
on 4th and 9, what happened?
No, first time we've got a game in doubt here as on the 2-minute warning.
Then what happens on 4th and 9 on this drive by the Steelers?
4th and 9. Oh yeah, 1st and 10 here on 122 to go here. Like,
Yep.
what am I missing?
All right, so we have this last drive by the Steelers, right? They're trying to run the ball.
Yeah.
They start 1st and 10, Dallas 42. Harris.
Oh, I'm 47. Okay, yeah.
2-yard loss,
Yeah.
2 yards, next play.
Mhm.
Prior for 1. It's 4th and 9, the Dallas 41. A minute 28 to go. Steelers 21, Cowboys 17. What's the Steelers are going to punt, right?
Yeah.
Did they punt?
Let's see here. Dallas, 1st and 10. Did they not?
No, Rocky Blyer ran for 2 yards. I don't know. It wasn't a punt, I don't think. The Cowboys get the ball back. 1st and 10 in the Dallas 39 with 128.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at that here. Dallas, 1st and 10, 38. 30 seconds left.
There's again, just stop for a second. Everybody realizes where we're at. We're at a game where the Steelers are leading 21-17. It's 1:22 left in the game. The Cowboys had the ball at their own 39. Not terrible field position. And you have Roger Staubach.
With a shot to win the game.
Yeah. Here we have a Super Bowl. Right? I think the first Super Bowl we've probably got. A little bit legitimate chance for a team to come back. They were down 11 and win a game in the last 3 minutes of the Super Bowl.
Right. So our first play is incomplete to Drew Pearson. Next play. Staubach is it's another low snap. So like another issue with the center.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Another one with the center. Mensch gets it away and same thing that keeps happening here.
Yeah. For whatever reason, it just isn't clicking to get these plays off, and to get some, so.
Right.
At 1st and 10, the Cowboys get as far as the Pittsburgh 38 at 1st and 10 with just under a minute left. So we're watching for an opportunity for a team to win a Super Bowl with a last second touchdown. We had an earlier Super Bowl. The Colts won on a last second field goal, but here we are.
Yeah, and so here they're on the 12. Incomplete in the end zone, jump ball.
Yeah.
Nobody caught it. Last play of the game. Goes in the zone again, and Glenn Edwards returns it, which is sort of funny. Like Edwards returns it, and my first thought is, drop down.
Yeah, I know.
Right,
I know.
But
I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Again, another one of these things that irritates me in the game today, right? You've got the game won. I know as a defensive player, you're like, oh yeah, I gotta take this back for a touchdown. No, you're in, you're deep in your own zone. You got the interception. You don't want to go out of bounds, right? You might as well burn the clock off, but boy, you better take a knee pretty easy and not try to get too stupid with it.
It could have
man, crazier things have happened.
Yeah. It could have cost the game, and here we go. This was like, I loved watching this. Oh my God, I loved watching this so much.
Yeah, and look at the stats. First down, Pittsburgh 13, Dallas 14. Pittsburgh had the rushing yardage lead, 149 to 108. Quarterbacks, not great games. I guess the biggest difference here is, of course, we'll get to in a second, the passing and by Bradshaw and receiving by Swan. Staubach, 15-24, 204, 2 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. I mentioned earlier the sacks really, really hurt. Staubach was sacked 7 times. So that, you had that net loss in passing. Both teams fumbled multiple times, but recovered their own fumbles. But the Cowboys had the 3 turnovers in the game, and as I mentioned earlier, only 2 penalties, both on Dallas during the game. But from a box score kind of perspective, you mentioned this earlier, right? The MVP, Lynn Swann, 4 catches, 141 yards. You can do the math. On 1 touchdown, but a 64-yard. But all of those catches were big. 3 major highlights. For a guy who we talked about was injured and wasn't certain whether he was going to play in the game, and of course all that happened before Bradshaw got hurt. But that really, the Steelers' defense held as one would probably have forecasted and expected. It was a relatively low-scoring game, relatively close matchup, and it's really for the Steelers the big plays by Bradshaw to Swann that made the difference in this game, and the Steelers win back-to-back Super Bowls.
So when we look at this, do you look at this as the first real Super Bowl that mattered?
I think that's a fair kind of assessment of things, right? Because, yeah, the Colts beat the Cowboys right back in Super Bowl 5 on that last second field goal, but that was a sloppy, messy kind of game. So I think this is the first great Super Bowl. And I think what's fascinating about it, it's held the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as we mentioned earlier, if you want to put together a fair list of the top 10 Super Bowls of all time, and we're well over 50 Super Bowls now, this was probably falling somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, depending how you want to do it. But it's still going to rank up there, even though the game is a lot different and Super Bowls have been played. There's a lot of history there. It is the first great Super Bowl. And here's the thing I find interesting about this game as well, Kurt, as we see the aftermath. It's only chapter 1 for these 2 teams.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Both of them have work yet to be done in this decade. And there's going to be a bookend to this game that I think also helps kind of solidify the legacy of Super Bowl 10.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to be doing another one.
Yes, I think we're on a good run of Super Bowls. You and I talked about this. Maybe the fans don't really appreciate it as much as we and I, but for me, the mid to late 70s Super Bowls really is when I started watching the game. I think there's some interesting matchups. They're not necessarily all as great as this game, although one of them will be coming up. But we got a good run here of games that I think really they sort of illustrate the emergence of the Super Bowl as this national sports phenomenon, everything from halftime to refereeing to pregame to announcing, but star players, star teams in the 70s, and pop culture and all of that, the Goodyear blimp cheerleaders, it's all here. And we're just starting to see it, and we're going to see some more on upcoming shows when we do some more of these Super Bowl of the 70s as we continue our look back at some of the greatest games in NFL history.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, there's a whole lot of things that we do here in the Buchnerverse. One sec. The Buchnerverse. No? Okay.
Yep, I got
it. Where we look at different things that we could possibly do. Evan Nolan and I, my good friend, we look at every now and then, every week we look at Hall of Fame related news. Check that out here. Sometimes it's more interesting than others. Sometimes it's not. I don't know. I'm gonna shit on Lizzo. Something I did not see in my bingo card.
Yeah, but stuff is worth interest, and a lot of these stories and things you're gonna highlighting kind of cut across a lot of different interesting debates and issues and pop culture and society today, and places like this, history and greatness, players and teams and sports, football and otherwise. So yeah, some great stuff there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for saying that. Muchos gusto, as the Spanish would say. I also do a show with Vinny Lospinoso, our good friend. Vinny does a great job saying who he thinks should be in the Hall of Fame. It's not just any Hall of Fame, it's whatever Hall of Fame he thinks of for that particular purpose. As we're recording this, the last one he did was for Don Cherry.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really, really happy with that one. Vinny is an awesome person. If you don't follow him, please do. Even if you don't always agree with what he says. And neither do Paul and I.
Yeah.
All the time, but like Vinny's so cool because Vinny is Vinny.
Yep, he is. He's got a real passion.
Yeah.
He's a younger guy. He's building a career and he's building interest, and he puts the legwork in, and he's done the research, and he's more than happy to make a case. If you're a small hall kind of guy, you're probably not going to be keen, but if you're open-minded to sports Hall of Fame and a longer history and legacy of contributors and players who have cases that he feels are historic enough to be made, he's going to make them. So good for Vinny.
Yeah, and I don't agree with everything he does. Don't have to. I just want to give him a platform, and he's awesome.
Yeah,
so check that out. Also, too, I have another show called how the hell was this a hit? Tomorrow night, or actually tonight, as we're recording this. Have you ever heard of De Etre Bebe?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah.
Did I tell this before?
No, but go ahead for our audience.
No, seriously? Okay. De Etre Bebe is from a really? Okay. I'm blown away. I did not think it
Well, I mean, I'm vaguely familiar. I don't know all the background, but it doesn't. Yeah. So give us a tease. What we're going to see.
There you go. It's from a 4-year-old from France who sang a song about how hard it is to be a baby. Well, I'm going to be talking about that tonight. How this song should never have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one for that particular show.
Holy shit! You know this one? I'm blown away.
Doesn't make any sense at all, but somehow.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Damn. All right. Well, with that, that's it from the Buchnerverse. Wherever you are, wherever you may be. De être bébé. Stay safe.